Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal. See playlist for other chapters and novels. Join now our Telegram channel now and enjoy exclusive early access. t.me/blood_immortal_official. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 1141. Never hand your back to the enemy. Looking at how the boundless future Buddha Lord was behaving the same way, the Void Master God and the Chasm Master God barked in rage. What in the world are you trying to do? Why did you back off once again? The boundless future Buddha Lord was truly helpless right now. He wanted to FCK this fella over as well. However, that guy was always taking out the soap to scare him off. This wasn't even an issue about whether or not that other fella was killed. He didn't want to lose his life in the hands of that lad. He did not know just how many times more that soap could be used for. But, when he looked at how brazen that lad was, not even showing a trace of fear despite coming to face him, the boundless future Buddha Lord knew that he must definitely have some tricks up his sleeves. And of course, that was none other than that soap. Your Buddha Lord. The boundless future Buddha Lord was just about to say something when he was totally stumped by the sight before him. The Void Master God had suddenly wailed out tragically, as his body had an entire hole blown through by a punch of Lin Fan. Not only that, his God core was even in the hands of that lad. Ha ha ha, Lin Fan roared out in laughter. Once he threw out that punch of his, who would dare defend against it? While those Master Gods might be powerful, what sh***use was that right now? Lin Fan looked over at the Void Master God. How about now? Are you starting to feel fear just yet? Looking at his chest, the Void Master God found a gaping void that was hollower than anything else could be. Fresh blood was gushing out freely like a stream as he raised his head over at Lin Fan. Return me my God core. He had not expected that this would be the sort of end he would come to. How in the world could the strength of this indigenous being possibly be this crazy? Earlier on, he had clearly defended against this attack. And yet, the indigenous being just ignored his barrier entirely and came straight for him, pushing that fist through his chest and seizing his God core away. They were Master Gods. Without God cores, they would be no different from cripples. In fact, they might even die from it. The reason why their bodies were so formidable was because they received the nourishment of the God powers. Without the God cores providing that sustenance, their God bodies would just rot out and fall apart eventually. Lin Fan pursed his lips. Are you, dreaming or what? Sensing the power of the God core in his hands, Lin Fan's lips curled into a smile. This was some good stuff indeed. The God power within was boundless like the oceans. Now that the Void Master God had lost his God core, what other capabilities could he possibly have? No, the Void Master God held out. Bam! Lin Fan used a little bit of strength. However, the God core seemed as though it had just received some impossibly tremendous force, causing it to shatter apart instantly as the God powers within gushed out and dissipated into the world. Gradually, the light in the eyes of the Void Master God dimmed out as he lost every single bit of life. Ding! Congratulations on killing Void Master God. Ding! Experience points plus. The feeling of killing Master Gods were simply way too great. The notifications from the system had Lin Fan especially feeling a sense of euphoria. Honestly, words were not enough to describe that sensation. Looking at everything before him, the Chasm Master God was just scared witless. To think that out of 4 Master Gods, he would be the only one left standing after the others were slain by that indigenous being. His entire heart froze up as fear crept in. This was especially the case after realizing that the gaze of the other party was locked onto him, causing him to feel a deep-rooted fear. At this moment, that impossibly steady and firm God heart of his was actually showing signs of failing as it quivered out. This indigenous being, he was no ordinary human at all. Chasm Master God, you're the only one left now. As for that bald monk, you can just forget about him. There's no way he's going to be able to save you. Lin Fan chuckled out. The Chasm Master God looked at Lin Fan and then turned his gaze toward the boundless future Buddha Lord, his eyes shining with a glint of godly light. Right now, the situation was extremely disadvantageous for him. The strength of this indigenous being had already far surpassed his imagination. He no longer had the confidence of being able to suppress him. Boundless future Buddha Lord, just when in the world are you thinking of striking out? Every single time, you're being so dodgy and evasive. Do you know that you're betraying us by doing this? The Chasm Master God yelled out. The boundless future Buddha Lord had once made an oath. Therefore, he was naturally not in cahoots with this fella here. But, if he were to behave as such each time they wanted to strike, what else could they do about him? Now that 3 of those master gods had fallen, this was an extremely incomparable loss for the Moon Shadow mainland. It wasn't easy to become a master god, and it was especially the case for the stronger master gods. All of them would require time to solidify their powers. Now that 3 of them were dead, how were they going to continue with their invasion of the endless mainland? The boundless future Buddha Lord was infuriated in his heart, even that Buddha heart of his had long gone berserk. He knew that everything was all caused by this lad here. However, what else could he do about it? The treasure in the hands of that lad was simply way too frightening to deal with. If he did not put his guard up against this guy, he might not even know how he would die. Right then, the Chasm Master God was contemplating about escaping. He no longer wanted to stay here, he definitely had to escape. Looking at the situation before him, Lin Fan's heart skipped with joy. Thinking of running, Roaring out furiously, the Chasm Master God sent an extremely thick chasm aura exploding out. The void tore to open a single gap instantly, looking like the malevolent mouth of a gigantic heaven-devouring beast. Within it was a destructive aura that was exuding forth, threatening to annihilate all existences. Indigenous being, you don't have what it takes to have your Master God killed. The Chasm Master God no longer wanted to linger in this place. He knew that if he were to do so, the only thing awaiting him would be death. Right now, all he could do was to make his escape from this place hastily so that he could inform the other master gods about this. They had to know that there was an indigenous being this strong within the endless mainland. Also, the boundless future Buddha Lord was not to be depended on. Standing at the entrance of a deep chasm, the Chasm Master God turned his gaze toward the boundless future Buddha Lord. After I head back, I'll tell the other master gods about everything that has transpired. You are not working with us at all. You're just diminishing our strength. He had an extremely huge issue with the boundless future Buddha Lord right now. They had worked with him from the very beginning, yet, he was the cause of the deaths of many master gods up to this point. There was no need to think further about his connection with all the events happening right now. Standing in the void, the boundless future Buddha Lord spoke up, Chasm Master God, you should not do that. The Chasm Master God howled out in rage, I should not do that. What should I do then? Even though you are not in cahoots with this indigenous being, you are clearly harboring motives of your own. Do you really think that we master gods will believe in you? After I leave this place, you will be the same as this indigenous being here, an enemy of us master gods. Lin Fan chuckled out, Chasm Master God, you had better leave with haste. I'm going to let you off. Go, go, remember now, this bald monk is no kind soul. Cooperating with him is as good as courting death. Heck, he can even destroy his very own clan and line. Do you think that he would want to work with you guys wholeheartedly? The boundless future Buddha Lord had suppressed all the senior old masters of the good and evil Buddha sect. Even though those senior old masters were his juniors, they were all from the same orthodoxy. However, the boundless future Buddha Lord showed no mercy as he took them down all the same. As for any disciples of the Buddha clan that tried resisting, all of them were slain. This was just a tyrannical reign. The Chasm Master God looked at Lin Fan deeply. Indigenous being, you had better watch out. At that moment, the boundless future Buddha Lord closed his eyes gently before jerking them wide open. Unexpectedly, things have turned out as such. Since that's the case, there's no way I can let you leave then. Boom, an infinite Buddha light blanketed the entire world as a gigantic Buddha palm covered the sky in that endlessly deep chasm. Under the might of this gigantic Buddha palm, the entrance of the chasm crumbled down, blocking the path of the Chasm Master God at the same time. What are you trying to do? The Chasm Master God hollered out in rage. He had not expected that the boundless future Buddha Lord would really make a move. The boundless future Buddha Lord closed his palms together and only said one word in response. Amitabha. Catching sight of this, Lin Fan chuckled out. Taking a step forth, he pushed out with a single palm strike. Chasm Master God, thank your lucky stars for today. Hurry and leave, yours truly will help you defend against him. Bam, the Buddha light dissipated out. When the boundless future Buddha Lord caught sight of this, his heart was filled with rage. Lad, mind your own business. Looking at Lin Fan deeply, the Chasm Master God muttered, many thanks. He had not expected that this lad would be the one to help him at this point. Turning around, he made his move to leave immediately. But all of a sudden, a dull sound drifted out. The Chasm Master God turned his head around. Out of nowhere, he found a dagger stabbed in his waist. You, Lin Fan shook his head exasperatedly. Remember this, never ever turn your back on your enemy. Chasm Master God, Chapter 1142 Stop Your Mother. Chapter 1142, Stop Your Mother. The Chasm Master God spoke up, you're so despicable. Lin Fan's face was calm, without a single bit of uneasiness in his eyes as he replied indifferently, well, it's a pity you found out too late, isn't it? One stab, two stabs, ... The Chasm Master God had not imagined that his death would actually be so unjust. He was a Master God, someone who controlled and reigned over a part of the world. Yet, he found himself suffering from such a wretched death in the hands of this indigenous being. In fact, he hadn't even had the chance to use a single one of his moves. If the heavens were to give him another chance, he would dare to swear to it that even if he had to die in battle, he would choose it over such a lowly death. An extremely strong sense of indignance burst forth from the body of the Chasm Master God. Lin Fan retracted his dagger while nudging at the body of the Chasm Master God. But to his surprise, the body of the Chasm Master God was totally stiff to the touch. Ding! Congratulations on killing Chasm Master God. Ding! Experience points plus. The notification from the system rang out, causing Lin Fan's heart to skip with joy. However, he was still astonished over how the corpse of the Chasm Master God wasn't even budging a single bit at all. It was just like a heavy mountain that was crashing down right now. Boom! All of a sudden, Lin Fan realized that there was a formidable aura erupting forth from the body of the Chasm Master God, as a surge of God power pierced all the way into the heavens. The currents of the void up above were split apart by this, forming a calamity cloud. At that moment, a robustly firm void sounded out of the body of the Chasm Master God. I, the Chasm Master God, have died with indignance. I'm indignant. The brows of the boundless future Buddha Lord knitted up. He had not expected that this lad would actually be this underhanded. Furthermore, he could not have imagined that the resentment stemming from this Chasm Master God would actually be this immense that he could even gather God power after dying to form a single strand of his vengeful will, which could drift out between the heaven and earth. Lin Fan was slightly bewildered, although he could tell that this was the vengeful will of the Chasm Master God. To think that a Master God would have been able to cultivate it out. This was a situation that Lin Fan knew about. When powerful beings were faced with a situation of extreme indignance, they could cultivate and form a single trace of vengeful will. There was no material body or soul to it, let alone any bit of spiritual consciousness. It was nothing more than a vengeful spirit that was floating out between the entire world. I'm indignant, I'm just indignant. Lin Fan pursed his lips. Even if this guy was indignant, he would have to suck it up. As he opened his mouth, a formidable suction force emerged, swallowing that trace of vengeful will from the Chasm Master God right into his tummy. Ding! Absorbed negative will. System shall suppress it. Ding! Comprehended power of chasm. At that moment, Lin Fan was truly curious. He had suddenly discovered a tiny little God core floating out within his body. Now that was perplexing. When the boundless future Buddha Lord saw how Lin Fan had devoured that vengeful will of the Chasm Master God into his tummy, he broke out into laughter. That was something that contained the resentment of the Chasm Master God. If any ordinary person were to take it into their tummies, they would definitely be affected by this berserk vengeful will. Once this lad started to try and refine it, it would definitely be the right time for him to make his move. But suddenly, he realized that the lad did not seem to have any changes happening to him. It was as though he was totally unaffected by that trace of vengeful will. Lin Fan cast his sight toward the boundless future Buddha Lord. Bald monk, there's just us left here right now. Now, how do you think I should deal with you? Filled with disdain, the boundless future Buddha Lord scoffed out coldly, with just your capabilities. Lin Fan chuckled out with ease, how can we tell unless we give it a shot? Could you have failed to notice that the strength of yours truly has gotten even stronger than before? Upon hearing that reply from Lin Fan, the boundless future Buddha Lord froze up slightly, his expression changing gradually. Indeed, he had discovered that the strength of this lad seemed to have risen by a significant chunk once more. How could this be? Just as the boundless future Buddha Lord was still being bothered by it, Lin Fan bolted into the void in a flash, attacking the boundless future Buddha Lord directly. Given the current situation, he felt that he had what it took to try going at this boundless future Buddha Lord for a good round. As for how the eventual outcome would be, well, that would just have to depend on their respective fates then. It was basically a 50-50 given the current situation. However, Lin Fan knew that his chances were slightly higher in reality. After all, that boundless future Buddha Lord had to keep his guard up against him. B-starred. The boundless future Buddha Lord had not expected that things would turn out as such once more. Earlier on when he had tried to FCK this lad over with the Radiant Master God, the Radiant Master God died as a result with he himself had no other choice but to make a break for it. And the previous time around, he had so many Master Gods with him, yet they had still managed to let this lad give them the slip. That was just a bloody huge humiliation. As for this time, he was almost going crazy from anger. He had come together with 4 Master Gods to gang up on this lad. But, to think that at the end of the day, those 4 Master Gods would be killed instead. Just what in the world was up with these situations? He just could not wrap his head around it. Buddha Lord. The boundless future Buddha Lord did not have any intention of yielding at all as he counterattacked with a Buddha palm that was tantamount to the heavens. That palm crushed down from the skies, suppressing everything with an unparalleled Buddhist power. Lin Fan smirked out at that sight. I see that you've got some capabilities. To think that you would try to just fight back with brute force, Aren't you afraid of yours truly's soap anymore? HMPH. The boundless future Buddha Lord snorted out coldly. He felt that he had been too scared of this lad. Come to think of it, that was really one hell of an embarrassment. Bam! With that strike, a tremendous power burst forth. If this were in the past, Lin Fan would have never been able to come at the boundless future Buddha Lord head-on. However, things were different now. His own strength had already grown so much that he basically had nothing to fear anymore. Lin Fan chuckled out coldly, "Bald monk, you're not going to be able to cut it anymore. But don't worry, it won't be long before you die in the hands of yours truly." The boundless future Buddha Lord felt his heart clench up. The rate in which this lad's strength had grown was just absolutely astounding. If he were to give this lad more time, it might truly be as he had described, the boundless future Buddha Lord would not be able to defeat him anymore. But, how was all of this even possible in the first place? He was the boundless future Buddha Lord, someone who was going to attain the great Tao of the Heavenly Lord. How could he possibly lose to a lad as such? Lin Fan hurled out a single punch, bringing with it such immensity that it tore the entire void around that area. The Buddha Lord golden body of the boundless future Buddha Lord had an extremely high defense. At the same time, because he was fighting against Lin Fan with all he had, the future gear revolving around him was emanating out a bright streak of Buddhist light. This was the power of future. He had mastered control over the future Buddha power. The entire world had already started crumbling under this ferocious battle. For the moment, the boundless future Buddha Lord found himself incapable of taking down Lin Fan. He grit his teeth, knowing that it wasn't possible for him to have this lad killed this time around anymore. He then dove into the void. "Lad, you had better watch out." When Lin Fan noticed that the boundless future Buddha Lord was going to run, he bolted right into the void as well. But, how could he give him that chance? "Watch your mother. Today, we're going to fight it out to our deaths. It's going to end either with your or my death. Run your mother. Get the FCK back." The boundless future Buddha Lord turned his head around. He had not expected that a day as such would ever come for him as well. The lad was chasing him in hot pursuit. He had no plans of letting him escape in peace at all. Damn it, this was just the epitome of being accursed. "You're just courting death," the boundless future Buddha Lord bellowed out in a furious mad rage. Lin Fan sniggered out in response, "Well, I don't know whether or not I'm courting death. But say, how about you come to a stop first and we'll have a good chat." The boundless future Buddha Lord did not stop at all. Right now, the last thing he wanted to do was to waste any more time. He felt that he had a pressing need to hurry and finish his plan as soon as possible. As of this moment, everything that was happening had far surpassed his calculations. The only true path to home was when he would attain the Tao of the Heavenly Lord. By that time, no one between the heaven and earth would be a match for him anymore. As for this lad, he would be able to crush him the same way he would squish an ant to death by then. As of now, stop your FC King Mother. Chapter 1143 Let's Fight Melee. Chapter 1143, Let's Fight Melee. I'll run if you chase. These were the thoughts of the boundless future Buddha Lord right now. He did not want to waste time blindly with this lad here any longer. For some unknown reason, he was just getting this really uneasy feeling in his heart, as though something bad was about to happen. This feeling was way too nefarious. The boundless future Buddha Lord barked out, "Lad, don't you get overboard now. Are you thinking of chasing me to the edges of the world?" Chasing tight behind the boundless future Buddha Lord, Lin Fan replied, "Bloody stop and have a talk with me. Let's have a good talk. Don't worry, I guarantee that I won't scam you." Scram. There was absolutely no way the boundless future Buddha Lord would believe in Lin Fan's words. If he were to do so, he would end up like the Chasm Master God, filled with indignance even till his very last breath. To think that the Chasm Master God would have believed that this lad would actually help him to block a move and even let him leave. Now he knew of how miserable an outcome one would have after trusting the words of this lad, right? This was just an inhumane person. Heck, even devils would not be as despicable as this lad. And to think that he would call himself a disciple of the Heaven and Earth sect. His way of doing things were even more devilish than devils. Absolutely untrustworthy, despicable, and shameless. Even his treasures were so damned underhanded. Once upon a time, there was a role for the top 10 evildoers. But even the 10 of those evildoers combined would not be as lowly as this lad here. It wasn't that the boundless future Buddha Lord was afraid of this lad, he merely felt that there was no need to continue wasting his energy with here. He had more important things to deal with. Right now, he had finally understood. It was going to be absolutely impossible for him to have this lad slain given his current situation. The only way he would have the confidence of killing this lad was after he had attained the great Tao of the Heavenly Lord. As for now, it was still impossible. Lin Fan was getting exasperated now, filled with battle intent at this moment. He shouted out, "Bald monk, you've disappointed me far too much. Back in the past, when I caught sight of you, the only thing I could do was make a break for it and feel all flustered. But now that yours truly wants to duke it out with you, you're the one who's making a break for it. Can you not do this? How about let's fight for a good 300 rounds? The boundless future Buddha Lord turned his head around and glared at Lin Fan. Raising his palm, a bright beam of Buddhist light pierced through the entire void. Startled, Lin Fan dodged at it right away. Holy FCK, you're so despicable, to think that you would still dare to try and sneak an attack on me. Stand there if you've got the balls. Lin Fan had not expected that this bald monk would be so cowardly. At the start, he had thought that this bald monk would definitely fight it out with him. But, it was only now that he realized that he had been making light of things. The bald monk had no intention of fighting him at all. Right now, Lin Fan was already making use of his fastest possible speed. But, as though he had popped down pills and was high, that bald monk was somehow even faster, such that he could not catch up at all. Lin Fan took a furious stomp forward, causing the entire void to explode out. As he raised his finger, a sharp sword will streaked out and floated right in the void, slicing out toward the boundless future Buddha Lord. An infinite sword will that cut through the void and caused a series of ripping sounds to reverberate out. Fuse. Flying heavens. His sword will fused together as flying heavens started revolving up within the void, fusing together with. The boundless future Buddha Lord swung his entire head around. While he did not know what that lad was up to or what that thing in his hand was, he knew with a single glance that it was definitely nothing good. Aren't you really good at running? Yours truly is going to use flying heavens to pierce through your anus today. Pishu, Pishu. Flying heavens spun out at a furious speed. Thereafter, with the boost of the sword will, it bolted through the void and flew over. With an extremely penetrative force, it twisted the entire void in its path, generating an extremely dull sound. The boundless future Buddha Lord felt that this lad was just completely sick in the head. Just when in the world was he intending to stop chasing him? But all of a sudden, he realized that there were some disturbances in the void behind him. It was as though there was something locked onto some part of his body. This was a feeling that left him feeling extremely uncomfortable. When he turned around, his expression changed entirely as he swept his robes aside, sending the future gear flying out with a tremendous might that blocked the flying heavens. A ringing sound of the two items clashing erupted forth as the brows of the boundless future Buddha Lord furrowed. He had not imagined that this lad would actually have such capabilities. This was something that left his blood running cold. Looking at how even flying heavens was useless, Lin Fan could only curse out loudly, "Bald monk. Sure, you had better FC King run. But, yours truly shall have you know that I'm hell-bent on following you. No matter where you run off to, I'm going to be hot on your tails. You can try running for your entire life if you want to. You're a lunatic." The boundless future Buddha Lord was enraged. He had not expected that this lad would be so difficult to be rid of. Alright, since you love to follow me that much, you can just continue following then. Your Buddha Lord is going to see just how much more time you can spend following me. In the eyes of the boundless future Buddha Lord, there was no way this lad could follow him forever. Since that was the case, he would just see who could outlast the other to the end then. HMPH. Competing to see who could last longer. Was that something that this lad could compete with him in? Before your Buddha Lord was a Buddha Lord, he was a poor monk who had cultivated diligently and bitterly while sitting out in the desolated mountains for many years, just so he could cultivate this Buddha heart. Since this lad wanted to compete with himself, he would let this lad come then. Lin Fan had not expected that the boundless future Buddha Lord would be so brazen to actually dare and taunt him. He had initially thought that he would just let this off. Since he could not chase this guy down, he might as well just let him off. But, to think that this bald monk would dare to even mock him. That was something intolerable for him indeed. Fine, fine, you think you're good, huh? We'll compete it out then. A single day passed as two figures streaked through the void, crossing the heavens up in the north down to the earth down in the south. 2 days, 3 days, the boundless future Buddha Lord was getting a little vexed now. However, things were still fine, he could still bear with it. He refused to believe that this lad could still continue to follow through. A month later, the boundless future Buddha Lord was about to break down now as he glared at Lin Fan with a pair of hateful eyes. He had not expected that this lad would be this sick to actually follow him for an entire month now. In that period of time, he had not even stopped for a single breath's moment. As for that lad, it was the exact same, following closely behind him without stopping at all. This was just absolutely unbelievable. Lin Fan roared out, "Bald monk! You had better bloody stop down. We'll have a good 300 rounds of fighting." The boundless future Buddha Lord was just incensed. This darned lad had chased him for a full month now. Arg! Thoroughly enraged, the boundless future Buddha Lord came to a stop. "You're courting death, aren't you? The unlimited Buddhist Tao, heaven and earth Buddhist light." With him bellowing out in rage, a profound Buddhist light shone out in all directions from behind the boundless future Buddha Lord, causing the entire world to be blanketed by a wave of Buddhist light that curled out at Lin Fan. That boundless Buddhist light that was filled with an invincible amount of energy. This was especially the case for the power of Buddha that was enveloping the entire world in it. If any ordinary people were to catch sight of it, they might even be scared to death by it alone. But for Lin Fan, this situation right now was just absolutely wonderful. "Bald monk, incredible, you're trying to fight me head-on now. That's right, what's the point of just running away all the time?" Lin Fan's heart leapt with joy as he was totally unfazed when facing this immortal art of the bald monk. Stamping down on the ground, his hand took on the roll of a knife as he chopped down right onto that Buddhist light. All chop. In the fraction of a second, the entire world was filled with an overwhelming sword will that sliced that wave of Buddhist light into tiny shards. Lin Fan then bolted out for the boundless future Buddha Lord. "Let's fight melee." Bam! Lin Fan threw a single fist out at the boundless future Buddha Lord right away. After being chased down by Lin Fan for an entire month, the boundless future Buddha Lord was just filled up to his head with wrath. "I'll have your life." Opening up his Buddha palm, he pushed down with a palm strike that shrouded the entire world in a massive Buddha power. As it collided together with Lin Fan's fist, a resounding boom rippled out across the entire world. This was the explosion of power. Even the entire heaven and earth trembled out violently under this might. "Ha ha ha, this is just pleasurable," Lin Fan roared out in laughter. Flipping his palm, he then gripped tightly onto the arm of the boundless future Buddha Lord. Hee hee. At that moment, Lin Fan smirked out. When the boundless future Buddha Lord caught sight of this smirk, the color drained from his face. He had discovered something that didn't seem right. Chapter 1144 Everything is but a facade. Chapter 1144 Everything is but a facade. Lin Fan let out a nefarious smile. He had finally seized the chance. Heaven and earth smelt. Grabbing hold of the boundless future Buddha Lord was enough for Lin Fan to drag him into the heaven and earth smelt. Pishu. Lin Fan disappeared from the face of the world. But, when he took a clearer look at the thing in his arm, he was stunned. Why in the bloody world was there just a single arm left? Where had that bald monk disappeared? Coming out of the heaven and earth smelt, Lin Fan saw the boundless future Buddha Lord bolting into the distant void while blasting out in rage. "Lad. You had better wait up. Just you wait." The boundless future Buddha Lord was practically on the brink of breaking down right now. To think that this lad would be this despicable and shameless. Initially, he had thought that the lad only had a single treasure that could FCK him over. But who knew that the lad would actually have one more up his sleeves? Back when he realized that lad was grabbing onto his arm, he had already sensed something strange. It felt as though he had just fallen for a trick or something. Without any hesitation, he severed his arm right away. And at the end, it proved that his decisive act was indeed the right choice to make. If he had not done so, he would have been dragged into that mysterious smelt by that lad as well. At that moment, he did not even know what else to say anymore. He had never imagined that a lad who was equivalent to trash in his eyes would be able to grow to this extent. Lin Fan, on the other hand, pursed his lips while looking up at the void. That bald monk had managed to escape once more. That guy was simply being way too cautious, such that he did not leave Lin Fan a single opening at all. All of a sudden, Lin Fan discovered some feedback coming from that arm he was holding onto. Lin Fan checked it out in surprise. Benefactor. A radiant sound boomed out in Lin Fan's ears. Taking an even closer look, Lin Fan discovered that there were 10 bald monks suppressed in that Buddha palm. Who are you guys? He asked curiously, not expecting that there would be sh*t like this in the palm of the boundless future Buddha Lord. Hello, Benefactor. We poor monks are the senior old masters of the good and evil Buddha sect, and we're presently being suppressed by the boundless future Buddha Lord in this place. One of the bald monks replied. Lin Fan peered carefully, and I'm supposed to just take your words for it? I don't know about that. It's only natural that you have your doubts, Benefactor. We've heard that you're a disciple of the Heaven and Earth sect, Benefactor. If it's possible, could you take us to the Heaven and Earth sect? Old Master Zheng Yangtian of your revered sect would definitely be able to tell. Lin Fan nodded his head. Alright, I'll take you guys there then. He then kept that Buddha arm in his storage. To think that the boundless future Buddha Lord would have suppressed these bald monks as well. However, Lin Fan did not know who they were at all. Since that was the case, he would just take them back to the sect to check out if they were real or not. And if they weren't, he could very well just subdue them later on. Looking into the distance, Lin Fan dove into the void and headed back for the sect. At that moment, the boundless future Buddha Lord, who was in the midst of escaping, came out of the void. He had suddenly discovered a problem. He seemed to have kept all of those bald monks of the good and evil Buddha sect he had suppressed in that Buddha arm of his. Arg, the boundless future Buddha Lord howled out all of a sudden. It wasn't a mere thought, it was the truth. All of those fellas were still sealed in that severed arm of his. Those fellas were all a part of his plan. Now that he had lost them, what was he supposed to do? Damn it, god damn it, one fine day, he must definitely have that lad killed. Otherwise, there was no way he was going to be able to appease this hateful vengeance boiling in his heart. Who was there? Come out. Suddenly, the boundless future Buddha Lord had caught hold of a mysterious aura that had appeared in the void. It's been a long time, boundless future Buddha Lord. To think that you would be in such a wretched state right now. A cloud of black mist appeared in the void before gradually materializing into a physical body. A figure shrouded with a black robe appeared, his face could not be seen at all. When the boundless future Buddha Lord caught sight of this person, his brows furrowed. His tone evidently brought forth a trace of disbelief. It's you. Indeed, it's me, the black-robed person replied with a low, husky voice. If one did not use their eyes to literally look at him, they might not have caught even a whiff of his aura at all. What do you want? The boundless future Buddha Lord looked at this person warily without the slightest bit of carelessness. Even though it was a pity that he had lost those fellas through severing his arm, so be it. His Buddha power then gushed out wildly, healing up that severed arm of his. However, it was no longer the same arm as before. Well, you must be wondering about the background of that lad, right? Perhaps, I can tell about it to you, the black-robed person said. And, you'll actually be so kind-hearted. The boundless future Buddha Lord snorted out coldly. The black-robed person did not reply to the boundless future Buddha Lord's question. He just continued, based on what I know, he should be the reincarnation of Heavenly Lord Xinfeng. Impossible. For one to reincarnate, they would require the Heavenly Lord source. Back then when Heavenly Lord Xinfeng had fallen, his source had long dissipated. Don't try and lie to me. The boundless future Buddha Lord retorted. The black-robed person merely chuckled, whether or not you believe it is up to you. Indeed, his Heavenly Lord source was destroyed back then. But, I'm afraid you must have not known that Heavenly Lord Xinfeng had long predicted for those things to happen. That was just a facade that he created, because he was afraid of you guys fighting over the Heavenly Lord source. To think that you guys would have been deceived by him for a good hundreds of thousands of years. How tragic. The boundless future Buddha Lord suddenly thought back about that Heaven and Earth Sutra. He then looked at the black-robed person. What's your point of telling me all this? What do you want? The black-robed person laughed out coldly. I was thinking that perhaps we could cooperate. I'll help you to become a Heavenly Lord. The boundless future Buddha Lord was filled with disdain. HMPH. With just your capabilities. The black-robed person laughed out before his tone darkened down sinisterly. Other than Heavenly Lord Shinfeng, there's no one in this world who knows the Tao of the Heavenly Lord better than I do. Even you are no match for my knowledge. Laughable. Do you think that your Buddha Lord is someone who can be scared off by a few mere words of hoaxes from you? Unless you're trying to say that even Heavenly Lord Tao comprehension can't compare with you. The boundless future Buddha Lord scoffed. The black-robed person did not reply and merely removed his black cloak and hood. When the boundless future Buddha Lord caught sight of that face of his, he was entirely stumped, heaving in a deep breath of air. All right, as long as you help me to attain the Tao of Heavenly Lord, no matter what you require, I can promise it to you. However, I'm still doubtful of everything you've said. Why is that lad so crafty then? Every single treasure he has is extremely underhanded. If he was truly the reincarnation of Heavenly Lord Shinfeng, he would definitely not behave as such. The black-robed person was taken aback, as though he was struck by the question posed. He then replied calmly, everything is but a facade. It is naturally because he is afraid of being recognized by you guys. The boundless future Buddha Lord was deeply skeptical about this. Facade. Wasn't there just a little too many facades? However, now was not the time for him to overthink things anymore. As long as he were to attain the Tao of the Heavenly Lord, he could give up everything else. Heaven and Earth Sect. After chasing the boundless future Buddha Lord for such a long time, Lin Fan was feeling a little worn out as well. However, the returns from this trip were simply fabulous. He had killed so many master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland, and had caused such a huge ruckus that they were definitely suffering immense losses. If he were to head out there and kill them a few more times, wouldn't that be just crazy then? He would just skyrocket in strength, wouldn't he? Thinking all that, he entered the depths of the sect. Old master, hurry and come check this out. Who are these bald monks here? Lin Fan took out the arm of the boundless future Buddha Lord. Right now, he was going to get to the bottom of this. As long as the old master were to say that he didn't recognize them, he would throw all of them into the heaven and earth smelt to refine right away. 9 immortal kings and 1 immortal lord, rather decent. Who knew, his strength might even jump yet again. Chapter 1145 Two Tough Master Gods. Chapter 1145 Two Tough Master Gods. Recently, Zhang Yangtian had been kept busy with the affairs of the endless mainland. All of the sects had started gathering together, concentrating their powers as a whole. As for the side of the Moon Shadow mainland, the frequency of their attacks was increasing these days as well. Furthermore, there were many fights taken on by the master gods themselves. For them from the endless mainland, facing up against a master god would often require a couple of old masters of a mortal king state before they could even match up and fight evenly, and that was just against the normal master gods. For example, 2 of the master gods that they had to deal with recently were slightly trickier and tougher to handle. The undead spirit master god treaded through the darkness, summoning countless living beings who had died. This was especially the case for the side of the endless mainland, which had many living beings who had died, and were now being summoned by the undead spirit master god. For the beings of the endless mainland, this was absolutely unpardonable. The undead spirit master god was just desecrating the legacy of their ancestors. As for the other master god, even though his powers weren't all that strong, they were extremely sinister, such that countless disciples had found themselves dead in the hands of the other party without anyone being alerted to it or being prepared for it in the slightest bit. Even some of the old masters had suffered considerable losses in his hands. He was none other than the Nightmare Master God. While his powers weren't the greatest, he was present everywhere. Each time someone was to fall into a deep sleep, he would appear in their dreams to slowly guide and lure them till they were smothered right in their slumber. Even if they were to keep their eyes wide open, the Nightmare Master God could still find a way to sneak into their consciousness and create all sorts of dreamscapes, such that they could not differentiate between reality and illusion even right before their eyes. In fact, that would even cause some of the disciples from the endless mainland to slaughter and fight amongst themselves. By the time they were to wake up to it all, it would be too late. You've returned. Zhang Yangtian appeared before Lin Fan. When Lin Fan caught sight of the old master, his face changed slightly. Old master, what's wrong with your arm? Zhang Yangtian looked over at his arm and replied with an indifferent tone, it's nothing. I met with the undead spirit master god of the Moon Shadow mainland and was pestered by his death chi. It's just not purged yet at the moment. However, it won't take long now. Once it's purged, the arm will regrow itself as well. Lin Fan's brows furrowed. Watch me. Extending his hand, he grabbed Zhang Yangtian's arm area and ripped out a ball of death chi. Giving it a squeeze with his finger, it dissipated and scattered out into the world. Zhang Yangtian was taken aback. Your cultivation state. He had not expected that the cultivation state of this lad would have grown to such a state. Even if it were him, he could only take time and slowly remove the death chi of the undead spirit master god. But, the fact that this lad could have gotten rid of it with just a single grab was rather astounding. Lin Fan chuckled. After rampaging for a little bit outside, I've raised it by quite a bit. Right, help me to check if you know these bald monks inside. Zhang Yangtian looked into that Buddha palm. When he caught sight of the people trapped within, his face tensed up for a moment. Old Master Pu Xin. Brother Zhang, it's been a long time. Because this benefactor here does not know of us, we had requested for him to bring us over here. To think that you would have been able to groom such a disciple, Brother Zhang. This is truly a huge pride for the Heaven and Earth sect. Old Master Pu Xin remarked. Zhang Yangtian continued hurriedly, hurry and let Old Master Pu Xin out. This is the #1 Old Master of the good and evil Buddha sect with a heart that cares for the entire world. For the endless mainland to be able to maintain its peace, much credit goes to Old Master Pu Xin. Lin Fan had not expected that his old master would have really recognized these bald monks. Feeling a bit relieved, he smashed the Buddha palm of the boundless future Buddha Lord apart and broke the seal within, letting them out. The place sparkled out with Buddhist lights as 10 esteemed monks of the Buddha clan appeared before Lin Fan. Amitabha, thank you for the life-saving grace, benefactor. Old Master Pu Xin thanked Lin Fan gratefully. Zhang Yangtian asked, Old Master Pu Xin, why are you guys locked up within this Buddha palm? Old Master Pu Xin could only sigh out regrettably, highs. After returning to the world, the boundless future Buddha Lord came over to our good and evil Buddha sect. Naturally, we knew that he had already fallen into the Tao of the evil Buddha, and wanted to persuade him to repent. However, he was sunken far too deep for him to come out of it. He then suppressed us and wanted to take away our Buddha hearts so that he could use it to refine and perfect his own Buddha heart to attain the Tao of the Heavenly Lord. Lin Fan stood at a corner and remarked in disdain, HMPH. Someone like that bald monk actually thinks he can be a Heavenly Lord. He's got to be dreaming. Old Master Pu Xin shook his head. Once upon a time, the boundless future Buddha Lord had fallen into the path of the evil Tao because of his unstable Buddha heart. In that battle back then, he had deceived the Buddha ancestor, causing the heart of the Buddha ancestor to fuse into his body. He had intended to make use of that to attain the great Tao of the Heavenly Lord. But, little did he know that the Buddha ancestor had long predicted this. Understanding that it was his own calamity, the Buddha ancestor chose to go down on his own before re-establishing himself from his downfall. As for whether or not he had managed to overcome his calamity, no one knows for sure. However, during the period of time when we were imprisoned, I could feel that the boundless future Buddha Lord's Buddha heart had sunken completely. The Buddha ancestor must have most likely failed. If we don't get rid of the boundless future Buddha Lord completely, the consequences of him attaining the great Tao of the Heavenly Lord would be unimaginable. By then, there could probably be no one between the entire heaven and earth who could take him down. Lin Fan was stunned, somewhat in disbelief. That can't be, right? Even if he were to attain the Tao of the Heavenly Lord, that can't possibly make him unrivaled, can it? Old Master Pu Xin shook his head once more. If it were just the boundless future Buddha Lord himself, it would naturally not be that scary even if he were to complete his path and become a Heavenly Lord. The thing is, the Buddha ancestor had accepted the fact of his own calamity and allowed his own Buddha heart to enter that of the boundless future Buddha Lord, fusing together with it. He did so with the intention of wanting to purify the boundless future Buddha Lord and led him onto the right path. But clearly, he had failed. If we were to allow the boundless future Buddha Lord to attain his Tao of the Heavenly Lord, the Buddha heart of the Buddha ancestor would fuse together as one with him, allowing him to obtain control over both future and fate. By then, no one would be able to take him down ever again. Lin Fan was flabbergasted, to think that the boundless future Buddha Lord would still have this up his sleeves. So, that guy actually had a cheat to unlock once he reached the Heavenly Lord state. No wonder he was so afraid of death and was all bent on turning into a Heavenly Lord. So, that was the reason. After this incident, Lin Fan did not know if the boundless future Buddha Lord would even take the initiative to come and gang up on him anymore. That should most likely be impossible anymore. Since the bald monk knew that he would not be able to kill Lin Fan, he would most probably be setting out to go and harm others then. Seemed like Lin Fan still had to be more careful in the future. After hearing that, Zhang Yangtian could only sigh out helplessly. Seems like this is really a calamity for the endless mainland this time around. Whether or not we can tide through this shall all depend on providence. Old Master Pushin muttered out with a Buddhist chant, everything in the world has its karma. When the calamity arrives, there will naturally be a thread of life available. Now that the good and evil Buddha sect has been annihilated, there's naturally no way I can just sit by idly. Zheng Yangtian nodded his head before replying, Old Master Pushin, we've coincidentally met two master gods who are slightly more cumbersome to deal with. I'm afraid that the only things that can deal with both of them are the two great immortal arts of the good and evil Buddha sect, the great benevolent radiance and the Buddha dreams karma. Old Master Pushin pondered, I presume that you must be talking about the undead spirit master god and the nightmare master god, right? Indeed, the powers of those two master gods can only be countered by the immortal arts of the Buddha clan. At the same time, I'll plant the seeds of some of the Buddha clan's mystic skills into the disciples of the endless mainland. Otherwise, under the might of those two master gods, most ordinary disciples would truly not be able to defend against them. Zheng Yangtian, I'll just have to trouble our fellow old masters here then. Standing and listening at the side, Lin Fan was coming up with some ideas of his own in his mind. Without the boundless future Buddha Lord to cockblock him, he was still pretty much like a fish that had found water if he were to head out, wasn't he? Furthermore, the only master god who could get him slightly nervous right now was that frost master god that he had bumped into earlier on. Given his current situation, it was rather true that he was unable to FCK her over just yet. That B*TCH was simply way too twisted. Chapter 1146 Strike. Chapter 1146, Strike. At the deepest edges of the boundaries of the endless mainland, a place where a nefariously boundless evil Buddha power was gathered, a series of blood Buddhas rose into the skies. While their faces were compassionate, the auras that they were giving off were extremely bone-chilling. And this place is. When the boundless future Buddha Lord caught sight of this Buddha before him that was shrouded with an entire sky of resentment wills, he felt his heart skip a beat. The black-robed person gave off a chuckle, that's right. This was the place where the Buddha ancestor himself had once imprisoned the evil Buddha that had fallen. However, perhaps even someone like you would not have known about this place. At best, you would have only heard rumors about it. The boundless future Buddha Lord had not expected that this person would know about this place. Indeed, he himself had only heard about it, but he did not know where it was located exactly. Even those old masters of the good and evil Buddha sect did not know about it either. That was because the only person who knew about it was none other than the Buddha ancestor. This was a place that had imprisoned all the disciples of the good and evil Buddha sect that had fallen down the path of the evil Buddha. For hundreds of thousands, or perhaps even millions of years, there had been countless of them that had been locked in here. Some of them lost their evil thoughts of the path of the evil Buddha and returned onto the right path. However, there were some that just veered even further till the point of no return, where they were lost completely in this place, turning into those evil Buddhas of an endless resentment will. Pointing at a spot up ahead where the resentment gathered was the thickest and murkiest, the black-robed person said, there. That is the place which you will want to head to. Triple Yin Infinite Buddha Lord, Sinful Sovereignty Buddha Lord, Blood Buddha Lord, etc. All of those countless Buddha Lords had been imprisoned here, causing their resentment and everything about them to form a Buddha pool. Within it lies everything that they had possessed. Perhaps you don't know this just yet, but the Buddha ancestor has two sides to him. Good and evil. As for the evil side of him, it is suppressed down at this place as well. You should probably understand now why I will be able to help you accomplish the Tao of the Heavenly Lord, right? When the boundless future Buddha Lord heard those words, he was stumped for a moment. His mind in a blur. All of those Buddha Lords that the black-robed person had mentioned earlier were people that he knew about. They were all starkly renowned people back in the good and evil Buddha sect. However, because they had all veered into becoming evil Buddhas, they were suppressed by the Buddha ancestor in this place. He hoped that he would be able to wash away the evils in them by doing that. But who knew, all they did was turn more and more evil, until they were eventually refined by the unparalleled Buddha power, causing them to be imprisoned in this place for all eternity. With that, their unparalleled resentment will surged up into the skies, gathering into a Buddha pool which contained every single thing of theirs. Not only that, the evil wills of the Buddha ancestor himself were kept there. If the boundless future Buddha Lord himself were to be able to control everything here, that would be unimaginable. The Buddha heart of the boundless future Buddha Lord started thumping up and down as he turned his gaze over at the black-robed person. What are you trying to achieve by telling me all this? The black-robed person gave a stifled laughter. By the time you attain the Tao of the Heavenly Lord, you will know clearly. Right now, it's better for you to not get entangled in the affairs of the endless mainland and just relish in the wondrous pleasures of attaining the Tao of the Heavenly Lord. Perhaps, it might not be that long before you succeed. While the face of the boundless future Buddha Lord was calm as usual, his heart was just rumbling and pounding with adrenaline. This was his encounter. If he could get control over all of this, just how strong would he be by then? How horrifying would he be? Everything, every single thing, was something that left one excited beyond one's wildest imaginations. Once he attained his Tao of the Heavenly Lord, there would be no one who could order him around or mess with him anymore. As for this black-robed person, the only thing awaiting him would just be death as well. Go on then, your encounter is awaiting you within. The black-robed person then vanished into thin air. Everything that would happen later on would be the issue of the boundless future Buddha Lord. Whether or not he decided to step into that Buddha pool, that would be his choice. If he did not step in, he could forsake his dreams of becoming a heavenly lord in this life of his. And if he did, the heavenly lord state would be something he could attain with ease. At that moment, Lin Fan's eyelid twitched. What the hell? Why am I getting this looming feeling of impending doom? Given his current strength, he was long able to sense danger from far away. However, he did not put it to heart. With his strength right now, what did he have to be afraid of? We're reaching soon, right? Presently, Lin Fan was streaking through the void with the old Master Pu Xin. They were headed in the direction of the undead spirit Master God and the nightmare Master God. The result of those two Master Gods joining hands was indeed something rather frightening. To think that they could force the various major sects of the endless mainland to retreat helplessly without the living beings of the Moon Shadow mainland taking even a single bit of damage. It was all because the undead spirit Master God was just making the disciples of the endless mainland fight against those undead spirits that he had summoned. Old Master Pu Xin looked over at the distance and could only see a thick mist that was shrouding the entire place. While it looked normal through his naked eye, he could tell the difference with his Buddha eye. That entire place seemed as though it was weaved together by someone and was a part of a dreamscape. Benefactor, check it out. The Nightmare Master God has made his move. All of those disciples have fallen into that dreamscape. Most likely, only immortal kings would be able to resist that. Old Master Pu Xin remarked. Taking a single glance over, Lin Fan could tell that that was truly the case. It's time for us to make our move then. Old Master Pu Xin nodded his head in agreement. As he closed his palms together, a bright Buddhist light blanketed the entire world. Buddha dreams karma. Suddenly, a sleeping Buddha appeared between the heaven and earth. Tilting his body, he laid down on the void while yawning out gently. Just like a heavenly thunder, a deafening sound boomed out and reverberated throughout the entire world, slamming onto the heaven and earth. That yawn contained the power of the Buddha clan, drifting throughout the entire sky. In front of them, those disciples were sunken deep in a nightmare. In their minds, it was as though a series of demons were pouncing out at them while they were holding up with a fierce resistance. Grabbing the weapons in their hands, they were charging forth against those demons. An immortal king old master stood there absolutely flabbergasted. He found himself totally helpless to intervene in everything happening here right now, and could only stand by and watch with wide open eyes. At the same time, there was a strong power of nightmare that was bolting out at him from the void, trying to break its way into his consciousness. He had to deal with that to the best of his abilities. This was no mere fight of one's powers, it was a clash between two mental powers. Against this power of nightmare, that immortal king old master was feeling extremely infuriated in his heart. To think that he would have to deal with such a cumbersome master god. If this were a direct fight, he would have nothing to fear at all. But, when the other party was constantly trying to invade his consciousness, he was left with nothing but a huge headache while dealing with this. Boom! Right at that moment, a reverberating Buddhist voice sounded out within their hearts, purging the power of nightmare away from them instantaneously. Those disciples that had sunken into the nightmare jerked awake right away. But, when they caught sight of everything before them, they were stumped. They had discovered that the demons that they had wanted to slay earlier on were actually people of their own sides. How could this be? Looking at the situation down below, Lin Fan raised a single finger. Life force started gushing out just like a stream of water that coiled and wrapped all the disciples while healing up their wounds. As long as anyone even had a single breath left, they were all healed and recovered with this life force. Old Master Green Hell, are you all right? Lin Fan asked. When Old Master Green Hell caught sight of the person who had arrived, his heart skipped with joy. I'm fine, thank goodness that you guys made it in time. The tricks that these two master gods have are extremely cunning. You guys would have to watch out for them as well. Lin Fan smiled out. Don't worry. This time around, old Master Pu Xin is here to counter those two master gods with specialized immortal arts of the Buddha clan. Old Master Pu Xin muttered out his Buddhist chants as the Buddhist beads that were hanging around his neck suddenly danced into the sky. They then enlarged as the number of Buddha beads started to increase in quantity as well. As he shook his hands furiously, that sleeping Buddha lying down on the void turned into streams of Buddhist lights that seeped into these Buddha beads. With that, the Buddha beads started to shrink down into tiny little beads that eventually scattered out and entered the bodies of the disciples out there. These were the seeds of the Buddha clan's immortal arts, and could automatically fend against the powers of the Nightmare Master God. When the two Master Gods, who were far in the distance, caught sight of this, they were astounded. The Nightmare Master God's face was filled with wrath. To think that these indigenous beings could actually dispel my powers. The undead spirit Master God merely chuckled out and swept his robes aside. With that, a power of undead spirits effused out, blanketing the entire sky with a snowy patch as countless beings started appearing. Chapter 1147 Who gave you such courage? Chapter 1147 Who gave you such courage? In that instant, the entire world was filled with an undead spirit aura. This was the aura exuded from the undead spirits themselves. The surface of that ground below was quaking violently, causing an extremely deep chasm to rip out. From beneath the ground, hands that were ghastly gray in color climbed out one after another as a series of low grunts drifted out as well. When the disciples that were keeping watch on this area caught sight of this, they felt their spirits rattled entirely. This was the scene that they were the most afraid of coming to face. It was truly the most terrifying scene that could ever materialize. The undead spirit Master God of the Moon Shadow Mainland had summoned out all of those people who had already passed away from the Endless Mainland, turning them into horrifying existences who had no consciousness and only a single thought on their minds: kill. Within that group of undead spirits, those disciples of the Endless Mainland caught sight of people from their own sects, even brothers and sisters whom they had fought alongside in the past. At that moment, a shrill and deep sound boomed out: indigenous beings of the Endless Mainland, when I, the undead spirit Master God, descend, all of you will have no chance at life anymore. Lay down your resistance and just submit to me entirely and completely. Old Master Green Hell looked at everything up in the distance. This is it. The methods of that undead spirit Master God are extremely crafty, able to summon all of those undead spirits. However, the difference is that while they retain a large portion of their powers before their death, they do not fear pain at all. The only way to kill them is to crush them into dust entirely. Lin Fan looked at the sea of undead spirits before him. It was truly rather horrifying. All of those undead spirits carried with them an aura of death. In fact, there was even a rather putrid aura, a characteristic that corpses would possess after dying. Old Master Pu Xin, this will have to depend on you then. Lin Fan spoke up. Old Master Pu Xin nodded his head. Desecrating on the spirits of our founders is an extremely heinous crime. Buddha is merciful, let me send them back to where they belong. Amitabha. At that moment, old Master Pu Xin shut his eyes gently, muttering his Buddha chants with a single palm placed forward. Instantly, a bright Buddha halo appeared behind him, emanating a bedazzling Buddha radiance. Thereafter, it pierced through the heaven and earth just like a banner as a series of benevolent Buddhas appeared in the vicinity of old Master Pu Xi one after another. As they chanted out their Buddhist sutras, the Buddhist voices started getting ever closer, just like millions of mosquitoes that were buzzing around the entire place. Great benevolent radiance. The highest of the good and evil Buddha sect's immortal arts could purify every single bit of evil in this world. At that moment, the entire sky filled with a blanket of Buddhist light that was slowly extending into the distance. It was so vast that it seemed as though every single bit of darkness in the world was slowly being consumed by the light, as rivers and mountains alike were swallowed up by this brilliant Buddhist light. When the undead spirits up ahead were touched by this Buddha light, they started wailing out tragically in pain. Balls of black smoke effused out of their bodies before dissipating into entire world. When the undead spirit Master God caught sight of this, his expression changed. How could this be? What sort of power is that? Could the radiant Master God have defected over to the side of these indigenous beings? But no, the radiant Master God is dead. Besides, this power does not belong to the radiant Master God either. This. Looking at everything, the Nightmare Master God frowned as well. Undead Spirit Master God, I think we should leave this place first. This time around, we can be considered to have failed. The power of that indigenous being counters ours. If we were to continue lingering here, we might very well end up falling here. Damn it, this is simply way too infuriating. Why are there indigenous beings as such existing? The heart of the undead spirit master god was filled with indignance. The only master god whose powers countered his was the radiant master god. But, since the radiant master god had been slain by those indigenous beings, he was naturally out of the question. If that were the case, it should be impossible for any existence to bring out the kind of power that could fight against the might of his undead spirit army. But, he would have never imagined that there could indeed be something like that out there. Go, let us return. The war master god has already gathered the entire war army to prepare for a total attack soon, right? It won't be long before all these living beings of the endless mainland are annihilated entirely. The nightmare master god declared. The undead spirit master god nodded his head in agreement. But, just as they were prepared to leave, a figure appeared right before them. The two of you are thinking of leaving before even paying us some greetings. That's not too polite now, is it? Lin Fan appeared in a flash and hurled out a punch onto the face of the nightmare master god. Bam! Amongst the master gods, the strength of the nightmare master god was not considered the strongest. On the other hand, Lin Fan's strength was much stronger than most of the master gods right now. After all, even the boundless future Buddha Lord had no choice but to fear the current him. For someone at the caliber of this nightmare master god, there was no way he could survive in front of Lin Fan. With that single punch, the head of the nightmare master god spun for a good 360 degrees such that the spine at the nape of his head had even snapped apart. For the nightmare master god, it was only natural that a damage of this level was not something he could not deal with. However, to the horror of the nightmare master god, he discovered that half of his face had been blown apart by the other party. Grabbing onto the head of the nightmare master god with a single hand, Lin Fan commented, "You think that you can just come and leave as you wish? How rude would that be? Even if you guys want to leave, you've got to offer something in return, don't you?" The eyeballs of the nightmare master god floated up gradually as they faced Lin Fan in absolute fright. He had not thought that this indigenous being would be so strong that he could not even fight back when that single punch was thrown at him. "Let me off!" The nightmare master god howled out in rage as a formidable power of nightmare struck out at Lin Fan's consciousness, trying to push him into the depths of nightmares so that he would be lost within it forever. At that moment, Lin Fan could feel the strain of power of nightmare that was circulating within his body. However, it was suppressed down by the system almost instantaneously. The nightmare master god was completely taken aback. He had not imagined that his power of nightmare could have been defeated in the blink of an eye. How could this be? Lin Fan raised his fist as his lips curled into yet another smirk. Do you know what this is? Half of the nightmare master god's lower jaw was gone by now. However, in that broken jaw of his, a series of light traces shone out. That was his god power. Looking at Lin Fan's fist, he replied nervously, "F fist." Lin Fan chuckled out, "Aren't you stupid or something? This ain't no fist. This is a fist the size of a sandbag. N-O-V-E in .c ohm. The nightmare master god clearly felt that the other party was just toying with him. But all of a sudden, that fist the size of a sandbag appeared right before his eyes, imprinting itself into his memory as it slammed down onto his face and smashed his entire head in. Blood sprayed out everywhere as his god core emitted an endless stream of god power, trying to repair that caved-in head. All of you master gods are clearly so weak. How is that you would have the courage to come and invade the endless mainland? Tell yours truly, who gave you such courage? Lin Fan's hands closed together and pummeled all the way down from above just like a hammer. A berserk source of power ruptured out and smashed the god body of the nightmare master god into pieces immediately. At that moment, the god core of the nightmare master god floated gently into the void as a thunderous roar boomed out of it. Degenerate, you are a degenerate. Save me, undead spirit master god. Save me, the nightmare master god bellowed out in rage. He had not expected that this indigenous being could actually be this ruthless, such that he would shatter his god body entirely. Looking at everything before him, the undead spirit master god felt his entire heart shivering in fear. Without lingering for a moment further, he bolted right into the void and tried escaping. Lin Fan peered at the undead spirit master god before turning his gaze back onto the god core of the nightmare master god and grabbing it into his hands. Nightmare master god, no one will be able to save you anymore. Bam! As he closed his fingers tightly, the god core of the nightmare master god shattered into pieces right away as streams of light flowed out. Looking at everything in front of him, Lin Fan could not help but remark, "How beautiful." Chapter 1148 5000-meter saber. Chapter 1148, 5000-meter saber. When the undead spirit master god turned around and caught sight of the scene behind him, he was totally alarmed. How could this indigenous being be this cruel? He had killed the Nightmare Master God, blowing him up without leaving any part intact, and had even crushed his god core. And that wasn't all, he had even dared to remark callously that it was so beautiful. The fundamental source of the Master Gods lay in their god core. No, he could absolutely not die here. Absolutely, no way. He definitely had to make his escape and inform the other Master Gods about this. Bam! Flying off into the void, the undead spirit Master God seemed as though he had bumped into something hard, being blocked from moving forward. When he checked the void carefully, he discovered that there was a glimmering layer in the void that seemed like flowing water. This was a seal. To think that those indigenous beings would have sealed up the entire place. By now, the guts of the undead spirit Master God were nearly smashed entirely by Lin Fan. When he turned around to look, he saw that indigenous being merely standing there without giving chase at all. Roaring out in rage, he hurled out a series of god powers one after another to slam onto that seal. But, despite his greatest efforts, that seal remained firm and sturdy as though there was nothing that could take it down. No, the face of the undead spirit Master God grimaced in anguish as he pounded both his hands on the barriers of the void repeatedly. He wanted to leave this place, he must absolutely not die here. He did not want to die like the Nightmare Master God in such a miserable and tragic way, without even having a single chance of reincarnating. This indigenous being was a demon. He was even scarier than themselves. Looking at everything before him, old Master Green Hell felt his spirits getting rattled. To think that he would be strong to the point where that Nightmare Master God was blown to death with just a single punch of his. That's just utterly horrifying. Old Master Pushin lamented out as well, he is the hope of our great calamity. Only, what's the situation right now? Why is he not striking out to have that undead spirit Master God suppressed? All of the other disciples were equally astounded. Naturally, all of them knew of Lin Fan, this man was the idol in their hearts. This was especially the case right now where they even had a sense of fear toward him. In the hands of senior brother Lin, that utterly formidable Nightmare Master God did not even stand a single chance of resisting. Just how strong was a power of that level? At this moment, none of them could settle down their nerves. They then started conversing amongst themselves. How do you guys think senior brother Lin will deal with the undead spirit Master God? Do you guys think that he'll just move on to smash him to death with a single punch? That seems really likely. The way that undead spirit Master God had trampled on our dead comrades is a crime that's only pardonable with death. Take him down entirely. ... Lin Fan looked over at the undead spirit Master God far in the distance, who was panicking his balls off, with a calm expression. Was he going to let someone like that off? Definitely not. However, killing him with just a single punch would be letting him off way too easily. Therefore, Lin Fan felt that he had the need to give him some good education. And right now, he had a need to craft weapons as well. Giving it a rough estimate, the distance between him and the undead spirit Master God was merely 5,000 meters. Therefore, he had to create the most tyrannical weapon that the world had ever seen. He tossed all the legendary materials he had into the heaven and earth smelt to select the type. Rumble, rumble, the heaven and earth smelt started vibrating, and in an instant, the weapon was created. Undead spirit Master God, get your A*S over here. Lin Fan looked at the undead spirit Master God over in the distance and shouted out. The undead spirit Master God was still trying his hardest to slam out at the seal with both his palms. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could not break it at all. Looking at that, Lin Fan could only shake his head gently in disapproval. Since the undead spirit Master God didn't want to come over, Lin Fan could only head over personally then. Taking a single step forward, he appeared before the face of the undead spirit Master God. When the latter saw that, he felt his entire body shivering in fear. Just what in the world do you want? Lin Fan chuckled out, oh, nothing really. All I want to do is play a game with you. November LBJNN. The undead spirit Master God felt that this indigenous being before him was just some bloody psychopath, a complete nutcase. If the other party had wanted to take him down, all he had to do was to slam down with a single palm strike and he would be done with it once and for all. But, to think that he would actually request to play a game with him right now. Play his mother's game. Just what in the world do you want? The undead spirit Master God wanted to fight back. But for some reason, he found himself lacking the courage to even do that. It was as though he knew deep in his heart that he would die the moment he struck out. Lin Fan raised his hand gently and wiped the void. With that, the seal disappeared instantly. He then placed his hands behind his back and stood there calmly. As for the undead spirit master god, his heart was skipping with joy right now when he caught sight of the seal disappearing. He then bolted out into the void, hell-bent on getting out of this place. Old Master Pushin and everyone else was confused. They did not know what Lin Fan was thinking of doing. Was he thinking of letting the undead spirit master god off? If he were to let that guy leave, wouldn't it be the same as letting the tiger out into the woods and creating future problems to face? Looking at the distance, Lin Fan counted the distance in his heart. 1,500 meters. 2,500 meters. 4,000 meters. 4,500 meters. The undead spirit master god spun his head around. When he noticed that the indigenous being was not chasing after him, his heart skipped with joy. He was finally going to escape. All he needed was the time required for a blink and he would be thousands of miles away by then. All of a sudden, the undead spirit master god came to a stop. That expression of having just escaped death was fleeting from his face, being replaced with one of shock and disbelief. Lowering his head, he caught sight of a gigantic saber that pierced through his chest, its blade filled with an extremely destructive power. Turning around, he looked carefully. That indigenous being was still standing where he was. However, there was an extremely gigantic saber that he was holding in his hands. Looking at the target he had struck, Lin Fan smiled. How about now, undead spirit master god? This 5,000-meter saber of yours truly is rather decent, isn't it? The eyes of the undead spirit master god glared wide open toward this indigenous being as he spurted out a mouthful of fresh blood. Why, you're just toying with me. Lin Fan roared out in laughter. Wow. You're smart, aren't you? Indeed, I am toying with you. Arg hhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhhh. The undead spirit master god howled out in rage, feeling infuriated beyond words in his heart. He was a great master god. And yet, here he was being toyed around by an indigenous being. Even if he were to give it his all, he would have to make this indigenous being pay the price. But, just as he was about to strike out, the gigantic 5,000-meter saber in Lin Fan's hand twisted furiously, mincing that god body of his into shreds. With that, the only thing left floating gently in the void was a single god core that emanated an undead spirit god power. Seeing this gigantic 5,000-meter saber that Lin Fan had crafted, he was truly extremely satisfied with it. If he were to meet with any enemies in the future, as long as they were within a distance of 5,000 meters, he would be able to kill them in a flash. Seeing that, old Master Pushin and the others could only shake their heads helplessly. Indeed, Lin Fan was not a man who could be judged by conventional standards. Most people would be filled with nothing but fear if they were to come to face a master god. But Lin Fan, all he wanted to do was toy with the other party. There was simply nothing anyone could say about that. Pulling the undead spirit god core over, Lin Fan gave it a squeeze and had yet another master god slain. Ding! Congratulations on killing undead spirit master god. ... His experience points had skyrocketed once more. Lin Fan observed his experience points. He was just getting closer to that heavenly lord state now. Perhaps, it would be enough once he were to kill a few more. However, given the situation right now and after everything that had happened here, Lin Fan was sure that it wasn't going to be that easy to kill those master gods anymore. Once he had everything here settled, Lin Fan returned back to the sect with old Master Pushin and the others. A few days later, Lin Fan realized that the entire endless mainland had quietened down significantly, and those master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland had not taken any action. They were not even invading any places anywhere. This had him rather bothered. Could they be trying to amass all of their powers to prepare a massive counterstrike? In order to verify his suspicions, Lin Fan left the Heaven and Earth sect and started searching for those master gods. However, it was as though they had disappeared out of existence as he could not find even a single trace of theirs. Even in those areas of the endless mainland that were conquered by the Moon Shadow mainland, he could only see living beings of the Moon Shadow mainland scattered everywhere. It was truly as though they had evaporated from the face of the world. Those master gods had disappeared completely. Upon returning to the sect, Lin Fan told Zheng Yangtian and the others about everything. When they heard this, they had a hunch that something bad might truly be looming over them. There was no way they would believe that the master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland would leave just like that. If that were the case, there was only a single possibility. Those master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland were concentrating their forces. Chapter 1149 Assault. Chapter 1149, Assault. It wasn't a good thing for the living beings of the Endless Mainland now that the master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland were keeping such a low profile. In their minds, the quieter the calm before the storm, the greater the impact they would have to face. As for the remaining surviving sects, none of them would dare to let down their guard at all. They knew that the master gods of the endless mainland were not going to let everything go just like that. Back when the Moon Shadow mainland had just invaded into the endless mainland, all of them had wanted to preserve some strength, and let others take the front lines and the brunt of the attacks. But, as the invasion of the Moon Shadow mainland carried on, all of them realized that they could not just stand by idly and watch. The strength of the master gods was far too great. Their methods were so cunning that it was simply impossible if anyone wanted to observe and wait from the sidelines. After all, if the master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland were allowed to just slowly kill off the sects of the endless mainland one after another, there would only be a single outcome even for those who had managed to survive all the way to the very end, death. Therefore, during the period of the invasion from the Moon Shadow mainland, all of them had put in loads of effort to communicate with the various other sects out there, so that they could prepare for their counterattacks of the master gods from the Moon Shadow mainland. Amongst all of the surviving sects right now, the Heaven and Earth sect was the one with the most skilled fighters remaining, as all the senior old masters and grand masters of the good and evil Buddha sect had joined them. Even the Kunlun God sect, which had some disagreements with the Heaven and Earth sect, had joined in the fray with them. At a critical moment as such, Old Master White Saint of the Kunlun God sect was willing to let go of their past hatred and stand together in the face of this impending calamity. Whatever hatred they had could always be settled after they were done with the issue of the master gods from the Moon Shadow mainland. Half a year later, at the boundaries of the Ocean of Death were disciples of the various sects standing guard with vigilance. The sects had all sent out an immortal king each to stand guard here, just in case the living beings of the Moon Shadow mainland were to launch a sudden attack. Against the invasion of the Moon Shadow mainland, the only way for them to have the greatest assurance of defending was for immortal kings to be stationed here. However, it was a fact as well that the disciples stationed here might not be a match for those master gods either. A series of patrolling squads were making their rounds around the seaside. In front of that vast black ocean which knew no bounds, all of them felt a sense of fear in their hearts. They could feel an extremely bone-chilling aura that was emanating out of the depths of that ocean of death. It was as though they would just disappear into nothingness should they enter within it. As for what lay in the depths of the ocean of death, that was something that no one would know about. Perhaps, the only ones who knew might just be the heavenly lords. At that moment, a single patrol squad was conversing amongst themselves. They had already been patrolling here for 3 months now, without discovering anything unusual. Say, do you guys think that these invaders of the Moon Shadow mainland might have gotten scared or something? Could they have just returned back home and would not dare to come over to our endless mainland ever again? In the past half a year, there had been nothing happening at all, not even the slightest bit of activity. Hence, these disciples had long gone relaxed over everything. In their minds, it was natural to assume that the powerful beings of the Moon Shadow mainland were just not going to appear any longer. However, all of the powerful beings saw things otherwise. This was probably just the beginning. This momentary peace meant nothing, and the truly horrifying events were yet to come. With their heavenly cultivation states, they had an astute sixth sense. In their eyes, they just had this strong, unshakable feeling that something horrifying was about to descend upon them. Other than the Moon Shadow mainland, what else could that trepidation in their hearts relate to? Don't let your guards down. The old masters have already said that those master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland are not going to let up just like that. They are probably just readjusting their forces and strategies, waiting for the best moment to descend upon us. If we were to let up our guard, the only thing awaiting us would be nothing but death. We know about all that. But, there's no need to get overly cautious as well. Given our strength, we would be able to tell from the slightest feedback in our surroundings. Furthermore, we're not the only few people or patrolling squads around this place. It's okay to relax at times. But right at that moment, the entire ground started quaking. The surface of the ocean of death shone with a brilliant radiance as a series of hexagonal star-shaped teleportation formations appeared. The disciples started exclaiming out, "Not good. The Moon Shadow mainland has attacked." Pishu, Pishu. The hexagonal stars flashed out intermittently as a series of figures exited from within. Thereafter, the edges of the ocean of death were filled up with a dense cluster of people. By the time those patrolling disciples reacted to it, they were already completely surrounded by living beings of the Moon Shadow mainland. In the blink of an eye, those living beings of the Moon Shadow mainland had them slaughtered entirely. They did not even have a chance of seeking reinforcements before they died. Roar! A series of furious howls boomed out of the place. The invasion of the moon shadow mainland had begun. At that moment, the largest hexagonal star of them all flashed out with a bedazzling gleam. By the time that gleam was gone, a series of godly figures had appeared from it. When those figures appeared out in the heaven and earth one after another, it caused the entire world to seemingly dim in comparison to their majestic splendor. HMPH. We're back. This time around, we must definitely trample over the whole endless mainland. One of the master gods spoke up. That's right. Right now, all the master gods of the moon shadow mainland were gathered here. To them, the moment to destroy everything here had arrived. In no way would they be as carefree and casual as before. After returning to the moon shadow mainland, they had found an even greater strength. At the same time, the Frost Master God had descended together with them as one of their main fighting strengths. They were determined to let all the living beings of the endless mainland know about the true horror of their strength. NOVLP in .c ohm. For their return this time around, the Master Gods had not only gathered completely, they had even rounded up all the resources of the moon shadow mainland and brought them here. Making use of their alchemy crafting techniques, they had crafted out numerous alchemy weapons that even those immortal kings of the endless mainland should most likely be unable to handle. At that moment, all the old masters that were watching over the ocean of death suddenly jerked their eyes wide open in shock. They had just discovered an absolutely terrifying power emanating out of the area. Immediately, they cast a trace of their consciousness into the void. News of the moon shadow mainland's counterattack definitely had to be made known to the sect. Trying to send the news out. You guys have got to be dreaming. At that moment, a series of figures floated out into the void. One of the master gods smashed the void broken right away. As for those traces of consciousness which were sent out, they were rebounded and destroyed with a single palm strike. To think that you guys would dare to come back. The old masters who were keeping watch over the place snarled out fiercely. But soon, these old masters found themselves completely helpless in the face of all these master gods. Die! A bright flash of light streaked through the entire world. With a slicing sound, those old masters suddenly realized that their bodies had been split cleanly into two. Far in the distance, the eyes of the War Master God were burning with a fervent flame as the destructive weapon he held in his hand exuded an absolutely gut-smashing aura. Indigenous beings of the endless mainland, your death has arrived. The War Master God snorted out coldly. Bam! Those old masters that were stationed here were no match for these master gods at all. With that single strike, all of them were defeated without a single chance of fighting back at all. The Frost Master God merely surveyed everything before her with a cold gaze. She had spent the entire time recovering the damage of her god core. Right now, her god powers had already recovered to a good 70%. Despite that, she was still the undisputed strongest existence amongst the master gods. As she swept her robes, the entire sky was filled with frost that blanketed down on the entire world. Extending out gradually, it didn't take long before the mountains, rivers, and everything else was completely frozen over. She was bent on using her endless wrath to turn the endless mainland into a complete world of ice, freezing it over entirely. The Annihilation Master God looked at everything before him calmly. Use the alchemy weapon, Chaos God Cannon. It's time to let the endless mainland sink into the fiery flames of war. At that moment, under the command of the Master Gods of the Moon Shadow Mainland, 10 gigantic God Cannons appeared. Those God Cannons looked sparkling fervently, as though they were created from the fusion of countless legendary materials. The moment they were activated, they let off a brilliant glow. At the mouth of the cannons, a rainbow ball of light was channeling rapidly. Aimed in a single direction, all 10 God Cannons fired off in salvo. With that, 10 gigantic beams of rainbow lights shot out. Wherever they passed by, emptiness ensued. The rivers split apart, the heavens and earth quaked. There was absolutely nothing left alive under this horrifying power. Chapter 1150 10% Destruction. Chapter 1150 10% Destruction. The many master gods present looked at the 10 brilliant beams of light as they remarked, "This is truly a beautiful sight." These Chaos God Cannons were the pinnacle products from the alchemy of the Moon Shadow Mainland. Gathering all the resources of the Moon Shadow Mainland and finally compressing every single bit of power from all the master gods, they possessed an incredibly destructive power that could shoot all the way to the edges of the endless mainland even from the shores of the ocean of death. Although, these Chaos God Cannons were only single-use items that could be scrapped after a one turn. Despite that, the effect was still unusually tremendous. 10 Chaos God Cannons were all that were required to cover 10% of the entire endless mainland. Heaven and Earth Sect. Lin Fan had been in seclusion the entire time. But all of a sudden, he jerked his eyes wide open. He could sense that an extremely terrifying power was piercing all the way over from far in the distance. Without delay, the next time he appeared, he was in the depths of the sect. "Old Master, I'm afraid that the Master Gods of the Moon Shadow Mainland have arrived," Lin Fan declared. Zheng Yangtian's sense of perception was nowhere as strong as Lin Fan's. Thus, he was stunned. How calm, quote. But before he could even finish with his words, the heaven and earth trembled out as though doomsday was approaching. Lin Fan's face changed as he appeared in the skies above the sect. All he saw was a beam of blinding light that seemed as though it was lighting up the entire world from far beyond in the horizons. At another side far away, the old masters of the various sects out there could sense the massive power that was coming toward them. When they bolted up the sky above their sects and caught sight of the gigantic beams of light that were ripping out toward them, their faces took on a grim turn. The power emanating from those beams of light was extremely horrifying. As much as they wanted to get out of this place right now, they couldn't. Their sects were all here. There was no way they could just leave. Senior old masters of the major sects. Just what in the world are those things? Could this be an attack from the Master Gods? Even though they did not know what in the world this was all about, they knew that they could not hesitate anymore at this moment. Everyone, fight against it together. Instantly, all the senior old masters cast all of their unparalleled defensive immortal arts to have the sects enveloped within. This was a situation that was happening all over the entire endless mainland at this moment, as every single sect, even the strong ones, were petrified at the sight of these destructive beams of light. None of them knew what this was all about. And that wasn't even all. The area covered was so great that all of them were included in it, and had nowhere to escape. Under the protection of the many old masters, a series of defensive immortal arts wrapped the sects up such that all the disciples out there were flustered and caught at a loss for words. While they did not know what those beams of lights were for, they could sense a blood-curdling power emanating from them, giving them absolute chills. Bam! In the blink of an eye, those beams of light penetrated through everything and struck out. Just like pieces of paper, those barriers that were imbued with the powers of countless of defensive immortal arts broke apart without putting up even the slightest bit of resistance. How could this be? When the many old masters caught sight of this, they were immediately shocked. It was as though they had just witnessed the most horrifying event on the face of this world. However, their shocks did not last for more than a split second. As the beams of light wrapped them up within it, there was nothing left but pure silence. With that, the entire place had turned into complete nothingness, without any living beings in it at all. All of those old masters were immortal king-state beings. However, under that combined beam of light, they were utterly helpless. That was just how terrifying it was. This wasn't the only sect that had undergone the same situation. There were countless sects just like it, disappearing instantaneously in the long rivers of history. Even if they had the cover of immortal king-state beings, they were still rendered defenseless. However, there were some sects that had luck on their side. Those beams of light had not covered their sects at all. Although, if their sects were even scratched at the sides by the beams of light, those portions would have been destroyed entirely as well. This absolutely horrific event had all of them astounded as they collapsed onto the ground in a crippled thud, seeming like they had just seen a ghost. Every single thing was engulfed in that monstrous power without being able to fight back at all. Lin Fan stood in the void. The longer he stood, the more horrifying those powers felt to him. Zheng Yangtian stood beside him. What's that? I've got no idea. Lin Fan shook his head. Till this point, he had yet to figure out just what it was at all. However, he could just feel an extremely frightening power that was speeding over. Not only that, the area of effect for that power was enormously huge. This, Zheng Yangtian had no idea as well. The Buddha eyes of old Master Pu Xin blanketed the entire world when all of a sudden, blood started to ooze out of his pupils as his face tightened up. This strength is truly formidable. I tried to peer through the long rivers of time with my Buddha eyes to make clear of things, yet I was severely injured by that power. This is frighteningly treacherous. Lin Fan contemplated for a moment. There's no other way about it. This must definitely be the counterattack from the Moon Shadow mainland. I'm afraid that no one will be able to survive under the might of this formidable power. Heaven and earth smelt. With a single thought of his mind, the heaven and earth smelt appeared, floating out in the void gently. Enlarge. Boom. At the same time as the heaven and earth smelt was expanding, that tremendous might was approaching even closer. In fact, they could already start to sense that ferociously destructive power coming close to them. Lin Fan did not hesitate as he caged up the entire heaven and earth sect with the expanded smelt, slamming it down onto the ground. he was still rather confident about the defensive capabilities of the heaven and earth smelt no matter what. Zhang Yangtian could feel his heart clenching up. It's coming. Far in the distance, a single spot of light was approaching in a flurry. Upon closer inspection, it was, in fact, a gigantic beam of light that struck out furiously onto the walls of the heaven and earth smelt. Lin Fan was stunned. What's up with this? Boom. The rainbow-colored light beam struck out at the heaven and earth smelt, causing it to tremble violently. Lin Fan's face turned grim. He was discovering that this was the strongest of all the strongest powers he had ever encountered thus far. Boom, boom. The quakes were relentless, as the powerful force caused the ground beneath it to start cracking out. Zhang Yangtian was absolutely stumped. Just what in the world is going on with this situation? How could there be such a destructive power out in the world that can turn everything into nothingness? Han Juntian was equally frozen. If other places out there were struck by this beam of light. He didn't finish his words. However, it was clear as day in everyone's minds that under a power of this level, there was no way the other sects would be able to hold out at all. Lin Fan did not say anything at all. As his palm made contact with the heaven and earth smelt, a sudden surge of power cruised through his body, causing the blood within it to rumble out furiously. He then retracted his hand right away as his eyes shone with a strange look. What a strong vibration that was. If he were to take it on directly, he might not have been able to defend against it at all. The light beam dissipated as the heaven and earth smelt started calming down. But, when Lin Fan kept the heaven and earth smelt away, he found out that everywhere else was absolutely deserted, leaving nothing but an empty void with dust clouds everywhere. This was an absolute annihilation. Holy FCK, Lin Fan could feel that things were truly not that simple this time around. Old Master, I'm afraid that things might have really gotten out of hands this time around. Lin Fan remarked. Zhang Yangtian looked over and felt his heart clench up. This. Old Master Pu Xin was equally astounded. This was a power that had far exceeded anything they had. Could they really have no chance of fighting back at all? November LBJNN. Lin Fan took in a deep breath of air. Old Master, we must gather every single bit of strength that's scattered out there right now. It's time for a final duel to the death against the Master Gods. Han Juntian replied, thankfully, all the major sects out there have already gathered their main fighting strength over at the Heaven and Earth sect. If they hadn't done so, our losses would have been crazily immense under the might of this attack. Lin Fan did not know just how wide the area of effect was for this power, but it was definitely not enough to annihilate the whole endless mainland entirely. Ocean of Death. The Master Gods were extremely pleased as they watched the wonderful work that they had just completed. As of now, the Chaos God cannons were already useless, but it was all worth it. 10% of the endless mainland has been destroyed with this. For them, this must be an absolutely painful loss. Get the entire army out for the assault and take them down completely. With all of us remaining Master Gods gathered together, who else in the endless mainland can possibly be a match for us? The many Master Gods laughed out as their eyes flashed with a deranged expression before moving out toward the distant void together. This time around, they were bent on suppressing the endless mainland entirely. The living beings that had an entire galaxy worth of numbers were clamoring forward in high spirits as their battle intent soared. Once again, they stepped foot onto the endless mainland. Chapter 1151 Grandmaster, you're too weak. Chapter 1151, Grandmaster, you're too weak. Half a month later, under the leadership of the Master Gods from the Moon Shadow mainland, all the various major sects from the endless mainland were forced to retreat continuously. The main reason was that after the strike of the Chaos God cannons, the endless mainland had lost a good 10% of its territory. Furthermore, there were countless of sects that had disappeared in the rivers of history along with that assault. After suffering from a huge dip in their strength, the disciples of the sects from the endless mainland did not have the powers to fight against this oceanic swarm of living beings from the Moon Shadow mainland even if they wanted to. Those disciples could not help but wonder if everything was truly going to end just like this. They could truly feel no hope any longer. After all, there was just too many living beings from the Moon Shadow mainland. This was especially the case when one was to include the super god beasts who were extremely ferocious as well. Not only were they enormous in build, their strengths were berserk. With a single smash of their gigantic palms, they could even annihilate an entire sect. Now that all of those Master Gods were gathered and mowing down with a full frontal assault, even if there were powerful beings who were holding the fort, they looked like nothing but mere ants in the face of this formidable force. Heaven and Earth sect. Zhang Yangtian was putting on a grim expression. Right now, wars are breaking out all over the endless mainland. There are simply way too many living beings of the Moon Shadow mainland to deal with. Unable to defend against it any longer, all the major sects have already started to retreat back toward us for backing. While Lin Fan's expression was calm, his heart was troubled as though his nuts were hurting tremendously. Gosh, those master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland were just not acting according to the way everything was supposed to play out. To think that they would just gather together right now and come with their full might, hell-bent on annihilating the entire endless mainland before coming to a stop. How many immortal king state beings do we have left in the endless mainland right now? Lin Fan knew that in terms of the quantity of immortal king state beings, they stood at an edge over the Moon Shadow mainland. However, there was a difference in grades even amongst the immortal kings. Only those of middle grade and above could actually stand a chance against the master gods. As for those newly minted immortal kings, they were basically no match for the master gods at all. It would most likely take just a single master god to mow his way through, while the average immortal kings would not be able to hold off at all. Zhang Yangtian replied, right now, there are a total of 93 immortal kings here. Out of them, 20 are newly minted ones. With that, the number of immortal kings that can actually deal damage to the master gods is down to the 73 of us. How are there so little of us? Lin Fan was confused. This shouldn't be right. But when he thought about how there were already many immortal kings slain by the first assault of the Moon Shadow mainland's invasion, everything made sense. No vel b in c om. Zhang Yangtian shook his head. This time around, I'm afraid that we'll really have to go at it with our lives. Based on the report by our scout, the master gods of the Moon Shadow mainland are rushing over from the ocean of death, all gathered up together. It's clear that they intend to surround us completely. This is no longer a situation that those average disciples will be able to handle anymore. For those master gods, anyone below the state of an immortal king is nothing more than a mere ant. Therefore, I think that we should have all of the disciples retreat to the back. Juntian, you shall take charge of leading all the disciples of the various sects out of this place. Let us handle the situation here. As the Grand Master, Han Juntian was immediately indignant when he heard these words. Old Master, I am the Grand Master. How can I stray away from the battle? Lin Fan chuckled out, Grand Master, you should hurry and take them away with you first. Even if they should be taken away, you should be the one to take them away. How can I, Han Juntian, leave this place? Han Juntian replied. Looking over at Han Juntian, Lin Fan's words got a little hurtful. Grand Master, you should really take them and leave first. Even though you are an immortal king, your strength is truly way too weak. You are definitely no match for those master gods. You might even end up being a burden for us. Han Juntian was stumped, his expression changing slightly as though he was stunned silly by Lin Fan's words. Grand Master, even though those words may have been a little hurtful, there's truly no other way about it. You know for a fact that the average immortal kings no longer have a need to take part in the battle anymore. Even if they did, they would just end up as cannon fodder. It's best to still leave some resources for the endless mainland. Lin Fan continued. Everything this time around had left him with a huge mounting pressure. He could no longer feel as relaxed as he did at the start. At the same time, he could not help but feel relieved in his heart that he thankfully had FCKED a few master gods over at the start. Otherwise, if the Moon Shadow mainland had their complete force of 72 master gods, the pressure of that would have been absolutely overwhelming. Zhang Yangtian coughed out gently. Juntian, you are the Grand Master of the Heaven and Earth sect. At a moment as such, you should know of your responsibilities and take the disciples away with you so that we can ensure that we keep a part of the endless mainland's bloodline. Of course, everything would be fine if we can triumph over the Moon Shadow mainland. But if we fail, no matter what, no matter the price, you guys must live on. Old Master, Han Juntian looked over at his old master before turning around to look at Lin Fan. Eventually, he sighed out, I understand. Boss. At that moment, Chu Zanyu and Jin Zhenggu arrived. Lin Fan let out a faint smile. The two of you lads have finally known to return, huh? But, fair enough, your cultivation states have increased by quite a bit, and you are nearly immortal lords now. The two of you, follow the Grand Master and leave. Also, make sure you protect my family properly. Chu Zanyu and Jin Zhenggu looked at Lin Fan emotionally. The two of them were both robbers in the past, and had followed Lin Fan to join the Heaven and Earth sect. Yet, even when their strengths were about to reach the immortal lord states right now, they still could not render any bit of assistance. This was especially the case this time around. No matter how stupid they were, they could still understand that this might very well be the last meeting between them. Boss, are you not going to go take a look at them? Chu Zanyu asked. Lin Fan froze for a moment before shaking his head. No, If I survive, I'll naturally be able to meet them once more. And if I were to die, that would only add to their troubles. For the great battle this time around, he was feeling extremely unsettled. He had been trying to calm himself down for the longest time now, but he just could not help but feel uneasy. It was as though a good 50% of his life was now entirely dependent on the wills of the heavens. Grand Master, you guys should gather the disciples and leave first. We've got to plan this out properly. Given the speed of the Moon Shadow mainland right now, it's going to take 3 days at most for them to arrive. Lin Fan commented. Han Juntian nodded his head, not knowing just what he could say anymore. He knew that the battle this time around was exceptionally critical. It was just as Lin Fan had said. Even though he was an immortal king, he was only a newly minted one who could offer no help at all. And in the worst-case scenario, he could even become a burden. After the masses left, Lin Fan sighed out. Old Master, could I trouble you to gather all the old masters of the various sects? We've got to discuss this through. Zhang Yangtian nodded his head. The 73 immortal king old masters had varying strength, and were the only remaining senior old masters of the various sects right now. As for some of the other senior old masters, they had died in the hands of the master gods. Not only that, there were those beams of light from earlier on that had most probably destroyed a good number of sects. It was highly likely that the other old masters had already perished. The old masters remaining from the endless mainland who were supposed to be here had all arrived. Looking at all of these old masters, Lin Fan spoke up. Everyone, the time for our life or death battle may very well come in 3 days' time. At this point, I hope that everyone can unite together. Everyone, please hand over all of your immortal weapons or any storage rings you have. I should probably craft and refine some stuff for all of you guys. Without any bit of hesitation, the old masters took out all of their storage rings as well as their immortal weapons. At a moment as such, none of them would feel that Lin Fan was merely coveting after their stuff. After all, this was an extremely treacherous situation. If he were to truly have thoughts of stealing their items greedily, they would just be utterly speechless over it. Looking at the storage rings up in the void, Lin Fan extended his palm and took all of them in. Craft weapons. Cultivate pills. Appearing in the world, the heaven and earth smelt swallowed all of those immortal weapons and materials for crafting weapons in. Whirring. In a split second, the entire world was filled with a luscious radiance as countless immortal weapons flew out of the heaven and earth smelt. Lin Fan sighed out, to think that at this final moment, he had not managed to craft out a single special item. What a pity, seemed like, the heavens were not watching and blessing over them. When the old masters of the various sects caught sight of these immortal weapons, all of them were flabbergasted. Lin Fan spoke out, all of you, take your pick from these immortal weapons. As for the defensive immortal weapons, take as many as you can possibly. They will at least be able to guarantee your safety to a certain extent. With pills through thought, Lin Fan then started replicating immortal pills. Since the war was about to begin, they naturally had to make every single preparation they could for it. Chapter 1152 Starting the fight with a beautiful takedown. Chapter 1152 Starting the fight with a beautiful takedown. At a moment like this, Lin Fan was no longer bothered with keeping anything up his sleeves anymore. While crafting these supreme-grade immortal weapons might most likely not have any significant use against the master gods, it would still be able to carry forth a strain of threat to them. This was especially the case for the defensive immortal weapons that could help to deflect some damage at least. All of the old masters were stumped. They had not expected that Lin Fan would even still have methods as such. Zhang Yangtian asked gently, do you have anything troubling your heart? Lin Fan chuckled. Indeed, there was truly something that was troubling him, the ancient saint world. Even at that point when he had ascended into his immortal king state, he was still unable to open that gigantic door. He truly missed Zan Yongxian, the Fire-Water Empress, Chiqui, and the others. He could not help but wonder how they were right now. He did not know if he would ever get the chance to open it again after this. But perhaps, it was for the best that he couldn't open it. At least, they would not have to face everything that was happening now. Lin Fan chuckled out, there's nothing to be troubled about. I was merely thinking about how everything would end up. While the Master Gods are the biggest headache of the entire affair this time around, the fact that the boundless future Buddha Lord has not appeared recently is also a big cause of worry for us. Not only that, there's a Frost Master God amongst those Master Gods, who is the strongest out of them all. The previous time around, her God core was damaged by me. But, to think that she would have recovered from it this quickly. This is some tremendous pressure here indeed. Zhang Yangtian sighed out as he patted Lin Fan on the shoulder. We can only try our best. Yes, Lin Fan nodded his head. Don't worry, even if I were to die, I've got the confidence that I can drag all of those master gods down with me. The moment he spoke those words, Lin Fan's eyes flashed with a tinge of ruthlessness. This was the expression of a man who was fighting with his life. Indeed, it was as Lin Fan had said, if there was really no chance of coming back against them at the end of the day, he naturally had to try his best to drag all of those master gods down with him. This was especially the case for the stronger master gods. He must definitely not let a single one of them remain alive. 3 days later, Lin Fan stood in the void of the heaven and earth sect, surrounded by various immortal king old masters around him. The faces of the masses were grim as their sights were fixated on the distance. All of them had already sensed an alarming howl coming from far beyond. At the same time, there was a densely clustered patch of darkness that was vast beyond anything else. This was nothing but a frightening army approaching them rapidly. Lin Fan's eyes narrowed. They're coming. At that moment, everyone turned vigilant right away. They did not dare to be careless. After all, they were facing the incoming assault of the Moon Shadow Mainland's full force. As for the master gods of the Moon Shadow Mainland, there were only a mere 61 of them left. In terms of numbers, while the Endless Mainland might have the advantage, they were probably only on par at best in terms of fighting strength. Roar! A series of maddened roars boomed over as countless living beings over there howled out ferociously. Amongst them were super god beasts with enormously huge bodies. They looked like colossal objects of the heaven and earth that were rampaging over. I'm going to strike first, Lin Fan remarked. With that, his right palm took on the shape of a blade that sliced out at the ground, splitting it asunder. As he grabbed out with both hands, it was as though there were a pair of invisible arms that were grabbing out at the ground as a furious holler shook the entire world. Bursting forth with a boundless amount of powers, Lin Fan grabbed at the ground within the radius of 10,000 miles. Boom! Ripping the ground up single-handedly, he bolted out over toward the living beings of the Moon Shadow Mainland, bent on crushing them to death completely. But of course, Lin Fan knew wanting to take down all of those living beings with just this alone would definitely be impossible. Therefore, he raised his palm and caused a series of sword wheels to surge up into the skies. World of Swords. Given his strength right now, slicing up and forming dimensional voids was no longer something beyond his capabilities. These were things that he could do with absolute ease. All of those sword wheels blanketed the entire world and flashed out with an unparalleled brilliance, capable of severing everything between the heaven and earth. To think that this lad would have already gotten this strong. Just that move alone, even if it's me, I might not be able to perform something as such. Zheng Yangtian could not help but acknowledge the sight before him. That single raise of Lin Fan's hand had caused a wave of sword wheels to flash out, causing the entire world to emit a bone-chilling sword gleam. Go! With just a single thought of Lin Fan, those sword wheels that were floating out in the void started pouring down like heavy rain, and slashing out toward those living beings littered below. But at that moment, a frosty voice drifted over. Ice wall. All of a sudden, a gigantic ice wall appeared in front of those living beings, protecting them within. Lin Fan's brows furrowed. Frost Master God. Boom. Even though the ice wall had managed to block off those sword wheels, it gradually started showing signs of cracking on its surface. Before long, it broke apart as the remaining sword wheels pierced over and struck out onto the bodies of those living beings, slicing them up entirely. The strength of the Frost Master God is way weaker than before. Lin Fan was elated in his heart. If this were truly the case, they might probably stand a great chance. If it were in the past, he might have been nervous about it. But, given the current situation, it was evident that she was far from who she was in the past. Seemed like her injuries must have not recovered just yet. Her strength was clearly not at her pinnacle state. Return. The living beings of the Moon Shadow Mainland retreated hastily before opening up a path between them. The 61 master gods that stood there came in all shapes and sizes. But, when they were gathered together, the amount of god power emanating out of them was absolutely chilling. This was especially the case for the Master God standing right in the front, the Frost Master God. Right now, her face was ice cold as she glared at Lin Fan firmly, exuding a dark look from her eyes that was filled with an abyssal rage. All the old masters prepared themselves. This was the first time some of them had come face to face against the Master Gods, and they could feel their hearts tightening up while they slowly built their auras. Lin Fan commanded, "You guys be careful. The strength of that Frost Master God and the War Master God is far from normal. Later on, leave those two to me. I'll handle them." Zheng Yangtian replied with a grim tone, "How can we do that? How are you a match for the two of them?" Lin Fan waved it off with his hand. This War Master God is someone who is around the same level as the boundless future Buddha Lord. None of you guys are a match for them at all. If I can hold these two guys back, you guys can go suppress the other Master Gods. Zhang Yangtian wanted to say more, but given the current situation, he kept it to himself eventually. He knew that Lin Fan was just trying to reduce the pressure on them. However, at a critical moment as such, there was probably no room for him to think that much anymore. The War Master God and the Frost Master God were people that Lin Fan had fought against before, and he was extremely clear about their strength. Given the strength of Zhang Yangtian and the others, if they were to go up against the two, they would definitely not have much of a chance of winning. This was especially the case given that those three veteran immortal kings had long disappeared without a trace. There was no way they could rely on those three helping out at all. At this moment, Lin Fan spoke up, "Frost Master God, to think that you would have healed up this quickly. Only, your strength seems to have taken quite the dip." Far in the distance, the Frost Master God's face was extremely cold. "Despicable indigenous beings, today shall mark your doom." Lin Fan chuckled out, "Whose doom it would be is something that can't be determined just yet. Do you really think that can do anything to me with just you 61 Master Gods? Don't forget now, all of those 11 Master Gods of your side that had fallen have all been killed by yours truly." At that moment, the Hell Master God stood out. "Indigenous being, you're courting death." Lin Fan looked at the Hell Master God before replying calmly, "Come closer and say that if you've got the balls." Amongst those Master Gods, the Hell Master God was someone with an average strength. When he heard the words of that indigenous being, he snorted out coldly right away as he stepped forward. "Indigenous being, so what if I'm closer to you?" Lin Fan guesstimated for a moment and could not help but nod his head agreeably. "This distance is truly enough." "What did you say?" The Hell Master God was stunned for a moment as though he had yet to react to that statement. 5,000-meter saber. Lin Fan roared out as a 5,000 meters long saber appeared in his hands right away. At the same time, the Hell Master God was pierced by it instantaneously. When Zhang Yangtian and the others caught sight of that, they were thoroughly gobsmacked. Just what in the world was going on here? Lin Fan bellowed out in laughter, "Yours truly is going to chop all of you trashes to death." Boom. With that, Lin Fan flicked his wrist as the Hell Master God blew up immediately before he bolted out toward the rest of the Master Gods. Go. Zhang Yangtian did not hesitate at all. A beautiful opening to take down a Master God just like that. Simply beautiful. And with that, the war erupted. Chapter 1153 Death of the War Master God. Chapter 1153 Death of the War Master God. Lin Fan was the first to rush into the fray. Against these Master Gods, he wasn't fazed in the slightest bit as he struck out with a single palm all for the sake of slapping these pieces of trash to death. However, the War Master God and the Frost Master God did not give him the chance to do that at all. They knew of the might of this particular indigenous being, therefore, they naturally were trying their best to defend against the other party. The hatred that the Frost Master God had toward Lin Fan could be considered as nothing short of torrential. The previous time, she could have crushed this indigenous being just like an ant. And yet, she fell for his trick and had her god core cracked up instead, causing a huge amount of damage to herself. If not for all the ice sculptures that she had accumulated over countless of years, it might have probably taken her an extremely long time to recover from it. "Indigenous being, your death has arrived," the Frost Master God said with a cold tone. She was totally unbothered about the invasion of the Moon Shadow mainland into the Endless Mainland. In fact, she didn't even have the intentions of taking part in the battle. That was because to her, all of these ant-like living beings were not worthy of her attention at all. However, the fact that this indigenous had killed the Water Master God had her thoroughly enraged. Now, she wanted to freeze over the entire Endless Mainland so that they would sink into an eternal slumber. Lin Fan snorted out coldly as both of his arms were wrapped around with a boundless power. "It's hard to tell who will be the one dying just yet. While your strength might be strong, you have yet to recover fully. As for the War Master God, while he may be powerful, yours truly knows no fear either. Killing you guys is nothing more than a matter of time. I'll see what capabilities you guys have then. Receive this move of yours truly." Lin Fan strode out with a single step and hurled out a punch. The Doomsday Calamity was a destructive type of mystic skill. Now that Lin Fan had cultivated it into an immortal art, every time he deployed it, it would always bring forth a power that was absolutely supernatural. The Doomsday God Spirit howled out furiously as those enraged bellows rattled the entire world. A series of Doomsday powers blanketed the world, wrapping the War Master God and the Frost Master God in it completely. At that moment, all the other old masters had long engaged in duels with the other master gods. In terms of numbers, the endless mainland had the advantage. However, in terms of strength, some of the master gods were way stronger than the old masters. Using the advantage in numbers to make up for their lack of strength was a strategy that would enable them to hold on for the moment. Power of Bigra. Lin Fan flipped his palm up toward the heavens as the power of Bigra burst forth before melding into the world and swimming out amongst the master gods. To the master gods, the power of Bigra was something that did not have much effect on them, as they could defend against it easily. However, it could not be denied that its mere presence was enough to bring pressure for the master gods subconsciously. Demon City. The big ancient demon who had been groomed by Lin Fan the entire time was let out completely. Lin Fan looked at the big ancient demon before speaking up. Today shall be the final battle. Go kill to your heart's pleasure and turn the heavens over. Roar. With that, the big ancient demon roared out furiously. He had been waiting for a battle as such for the longest time now. He was a demon emperor, an existence that was unparalleled between the worlds. Yet, he had never once experienced a battle where he could fight with all his might and sweat as he had never before. Because of that, his heart had always been thirsting for the flames of war. Now that the chance was presenting itself to him, how could he not get excited over it? Lin Fan took out the 9-5 legendary brick with his left hand and wielded the eternal axe in his right before bursting forth with every single bit of horsepower he had to engage with the two master gods. In this battle, it was either the other party that was going to be destroyed or the endless mainland. While the pressure was certainly somewhat heavy, Lin Fan still wanted to derive his heartfelt pleasure from the heat of the battle. As for immortal arts and mystic skills, he could not get too used to them no matter what. His favorite mode of battle was still none other than melee combat. War Master God, receive the axe of yours truly if you've got the guts. Lin Fan roared out before slicing through the heaven and earth with the eternal axe, causing a bright flash of axe light to burst forth and slice out at the War Master God right away. The ice barrier of the Frost Master God was way too strong. While it was most definitely destructible, the chances of Lin Fan getting to kill her weren't all that high. As for the War Master God, things were different. He was much weaker than the Frost Master God. If he were to kill this guy off, that would improve his chances at this fight greatly. HMPH. An indigenous being who doesn't know his place. The War Master God could only scoff out coldly in return as the towering body of his trembled momentarily, causing a strong war chi to spread out of him. The fine horses before him were even bursting forth with their 4 different powers. Incineration, Berserk, Flames, Horror. The 4 different powers gushed out toward Lin Fan. Those 4 fine horses were the mounts of the War Master God, and also representations of his powers. If this were in the past, Lin Fan might have found it extremely troublesome to deal with. But now, they were things that could not even withstand a single blow of his. Die, uck, a single cleave of his axe over and the 4 fine horses were sliced to death. When the War Master God caught sight of this scene, he could not help but yell out in rage right away while the long war spear in his hands was flung over. Indigenous being, how dare you kill the pets of your Master God? Go to hell. Lin Fan's body moved out in a flash while his brows burrowed. The Frost Master God was still patiently awaiting a chance at the sidelines while gathering a series of frost in the void above her that were taking on the shape of icicles. The moment Lin Fan was exposed, they bolted off with a pishu sound and tore through the void. Bam! When the eternal axe and the long spear of the War Master God clashed, a dazzling brilliance erupted forth from their point of contact. At the same time, the icicles from the Frost Master God had arrived before Lin Fan's face. His face tensed up as he tried to dodge right away. But in a flash, the War Master God grabbed hold of Lin Fan while letting off a cold smirk on his face. Indigenous being, where are you thinking of running off to? HMPH. Lin Fan laughed out with a cold, contemptuous tone. Heaven and earth smelt. When the icicles struck the heaven and earth smelt, a reverberating boom drifted throughout the entire world. Catching sight of that scene, the brows of the Frost Master God knitted up while she felt a sense of incredulity in her heart, not knowing what had just happened. Within the heaven and earth smelt at this moment. The War Master God was confused and stumped when he caught sight of his surroundings. What is this place? This is hell. Lin Fan let out a bright smile. But for the War Master God, that smile looked more like a taunt than anything else. Indigenous being, what are you thinking of doing? The War Master God roared out in rage. Lin Fan could only scoff coldly. To think that you would actually take the initiative to come and grab yours truly. With that, your death sentence has arrived. Refine. Boom! Instantly, the heaven and earth smelt was activated entirely as that power of refinement that could refine anything in this world started to coil around the two of them. Lin Fan stood there without budging a single inch, using his physical body to fight against it. However, even with the body of an immortal king, he could still not defend against this power of refinement. Arg hhhhhhhhhhhhh. The War Master God suddenly roared out furiously. He had discovered that his body was starting to melt down. He then looked at Lin Fan with an alarmed expression. Indigenous being, are you thinking of dying together with me here? Lin Fan heaved in a deep breath of air. The pain was so unbearable that he could not make a sound at all. His body was just disintegrating bit by bit under this power of refinement. The only thing that he could do right now was to focus all of his powers toward the area of his heart and ensure that he would not be destroyed entirely. To think that at the end of the day, he would still have to rely on methods as such. While it was true that the body of the War Master God was definitely strong, it should most likely be that bit weaker when compared to his own. No, the War Master God screamed out as he felt his heart starting to break down as well. He was finally realizing that this indigenous being was really going at him with his life. Lin Fan felt equally troubled in his heart. Come on now, stop with your incessant screams. Yours truly doesn't want to resort to this either. But, there's just no other way about it. No choice then, we can only suffer here together. In the past, Lin Fan was most afraid of the heaven and earth smelt because the pain was just simply unbearable. But given the situation right now, what else could he do? There was no other way for him to live unless he were to fight for it with his life. The power of refinement was merely getting stronger with time. Witnessing the body of the War Master God crumbling down and disintegrating such that there was only a little bit of it left, Lin Fan discovered that it was the exact same for him. His body was almost completely gone by now as well. In fact, even his heart might not be safe from this. Therefore, he naturally did not dare to put on an act anymore. Stop, no more, he must not refine anymore. If he were to continue refining, he might truly be snuffed out together with the War Master God. Right now, the injuries of the War Master God were extremely severe as well. Indigenous being, what you're doing is just causing a lose-lose situation. What else can you do now? Lin Fan cast a single glance at the War Master God and controlled his mythical parasol tree thereafter. Instantly, a boundless life force burst forth and gushed right into his body. In order to face the battle this time around, they had long prepared and gathered tons of life force. In fact, they had even crystallized them into a series of life crystals. At this moment, Lin Fan used all of them right away to heal up his body's injuries. Under the frightful watch of the War Master God, Lin Fan's body returned to its original look. As for the mythical parasol tree, the life force within it was dissipated almost completely. Lin Fan looked at the War Master God who had nothing more than a single head left, and just stomped it into AFC King Pulp right after. Ding! Congratulations on killing War Master God. HMPH. Finally FCKED over another one of them. Lin Fan laughed out as swept his robes and stepped out of the heaven and earth smelt straight away. In the blink of an eye, his only opponent left right now was the Frost Master God. As long as he were to take her down, the rest of the Master Gods would not really be an issue. Chapter 1154 Shatter. Chapter 1154, Shatter. When the Frost Master God caught sight of Lin Fan and not the War Master God, she was stunned for a moment. Where is the War Master God? Lin Fan looked askance at the Frost Master God. Dead. You. The moment the Frost Master God heard that, she was taken aback. She had not expected that the War Master God would have died. When he caught sight of the expression on her face, Lin Fan chuckled out, what now? Feeling reluctant, are you? Could it be that you've had an affair with the War Master God? Audacious. The Frost Master God was entirely enraged right now. She had not thought that the War Master God could have been killed by this indigenous being. In her mind, this was something absolutely incredulous. So what if I'm being audacious? Today, only one of us is going to leave this place alive. No one shall dream of being able to escape unscathed. Lin Fan took a single step forward and bolted out for the Frost Master God as that reverberating stomp of his foot resounded out across the world. Snorting coldly in return, the Frost Master God sent a boundless power of frost that spread throughout the entire world. Bam! The heaven and earth were destroyed as that formidable power caused the void to turn into ruins. Bringing the disciples away with him, Han Juntian had already retreated from the place. But, despite their distance from the fight, they could still sense the terrifying powers that were drifting over from the battlefield. It was so horrifying that just feeling it had them losing their guts. He truly wanted to head back, but when he thought about the responsibilities that he bore, he could only continue to lead the countless disciples away from the endless mainland till they eventually reached a safe place. At that moment, Lin Fan had already sustained some injuries. This Frost Master God was way too troublesome to deal with indeed. Even if her powers were not at her pinnacle state right now, her methods were still extremely dangerous. Those frost of hers were totally unyielding. Even with his physical body state at that of an immortal king state, he still had no way of dealing with them. Killing the War Master God did increase his experience points by a fair amount. However, he had not expected that there would still be quite a gap in strength between him and the Frost Master God. Just at that moment, a tragic wail rang out. Lin Fan spun his head around and discovered that there was a ball of flames that were burning on the body of the old Master White Saint of the Kunlun God sect. White Saint. Seeing that flame, Zheng Yangtian was totally helpless. He was fighting alongside White Saint to suppress the Flame Master God. But, none of them expected that he would have been so strong that even their combined powers were unable to take him down. Lin Fan's brows furrowed. He had wanted to step in to help them out when the Frost Master God roared out loudly all of a sudden, sealing the void around him completely. She then glared at Lin Fan coldly. "You're thinking of saving him? It's a pity you won't be able to leave this place." Lin Fan's heart tightened up in the face of it. He had already sensed that the power of that flame was not something that White Saint would be able to extinguish. Zheng Yangtian was furiously using all sorts of immortal arts mystic skills. But no matter how he tried, the flame refused to go out. White Saint was most likely in grave danger right now. Standing up in the void, the Flame Master God roared out in laughter, "Ha ha! Indigenous beings, how is that? The flame of God is something that you guys will never be able to put out for all eternity. It will continue to burn everything you have until there is nothing but ashes left." White Saint, who was being wrapped around in that flame, started to feel fear brooding within his heart. The flame that was engulfing his body was eating out at his existence relentlessly. Zheng Yangtian was still busy trying to save him when White Saint extended his hand. "Don't try to save me anymore. Take him down with me." "But you," Zheng Yangtian was aghast. White Saint waved it off with his hand. "There's no way to extinguish these flames, but I can still hold on for now. This Flame Master God must not be allowed to live. Kill." Boom! A torrential battle intent surged up into the skies before bolting out to kill the Flame Master God. Looking at White Saint, the Flame Master God merely smirked out in disdain. "Not knowing your place." Lin Fan was tangled up by the Frost Master God at this moment. He had not expected that the strength of that Flame Master God would be this strong as well, such that even the combined efforts of Zheng Yangtian and White Saint were not enough to have him taken down. "This Frost Master God, get lost," Lin Fan hollered out. Looking at Lin Fan, that peerlessly beautiful face of the Frost Master God let out a faint smile. "Are you frustrated now? Prove yourself with your strength then. Otherwise, you are just going to have to watch as those old masters of yours get incinerated into ashes completely." Courting death. White Saint's aura was getting fainter by the moment as those flames continued to burn him up. At the same time, Zheng Yangtian was only getting flustered by the moment as he could feel the former's aura weakening. All of a sudden, the Flame Master God's arm which was covered with flames pierced through White Saint's body as he looked down with absolute contempt. "You truly do not know your place, Zheng Yangtian bellowed out, "White Saint." White Saint's head slumped down as he struggled to turn around and look at Zheng Yangtian. "Why you still owe me a favor? I want you to pay it to me right and now. Take care of the K Kunlun God sect for me. Arg hhhhhhhhhhhhhh. In a flash, White Saint's body was burning up with every single drop of power he had. The Flame Master God was startled. He had just realized that this indigenous being was going to self-destruct. He tried to escape immediately, but suddenly, he found his arm being gripped tightly by White Saint, who was allowing that flame to burn his body wantonly. "Flame Master God, go to hell." No. Boom. The self-destruction of an immortal king was one that could shake up the entire world. Even time and space itself were flung into chaos at this moment. Looking at everything before him, Zheng Yangtian was just petrified. Damn it! At that moment, the broken body of the Flame Master God appeared floating up in the void. He had not expected that the indigenous being would actually blow himself up. Not only that, the force produced by that self-destruction was so immense that it actually destroyed half of his god body. Looking at everything before him, Zheng Yangtian was filled with nothing but anguish in his heart. Even though the relationship between the Heaven and Earth sect and the Kunlun God sect wasn't all that great, it was still a sect that had accompanied them as neighbors for countless of years. Die! Zheng Yangtian roared out as he bolted out at the Flame Master God with a single palm strike. That enormous impact that was coming at him caused the latter to snap out of his stupor as he burst forth with all his powers as well when he caught sight of that palm strike. He then retaliated at Zheng Yangtian with his flames of God surging up torrentially. As his arm was wrapped in flames, Zheng Yangtian could not help but furrow his brows while sending a boundless amount of power to gush right into the body of the Flame Master God. Bam! The Flame Master God was suppressed entirely before Zheng Yangtian severed that arm of his that was engulfed in those flames. Even though there were still some flames at the area of his wounds that he could not purge away for the moment, Zheng Yangtian focused his mind and used his powers to suppress it temporarily. While he was absolutely aggrieved over White Saint's sacrifice, he did not have the chance to hesitate at this moment. White Saint, as long as I remain alive, I will definitely protect your Kunlun God sect. The duel between Lin Fan and the Frost Master God had gotten so intense that it was practically at a state of generating white flames. Every single collision between the two of them had far surpassed everything in this world. Lin Fan had been trying his best to FCK the Frost Master God over to death the entire time, but he just could not find the opening he wanted. In his opinion, this Frost Master God was definitely on par with the boundless future Buddha Lord. Even his own 9-5 legendary brick did not have the chance to be used at all. It could be said that the state of the entire battle right now was extremely tragic. Both sides had sustained enormous losses, with countless of Master Gods having fallen, and plenty of old Masters being either injured or dead. Old Master Pu Xin of the Good and Evil Buddha sect even had half of his Buddha heart destroyed by the Master Gods. If not for the timely support of the other old Masters, he might have fallen long ago. The Frost Master God glared at Lin Fan icily, her face revealing signs of fatigue as well. She had not expected that this indigenous being would have been this strong. Furthermore, the way he was fighting was as though he had not a single care for his life. He was just coming at her head on time and again without a single bother for his body's condition. Indigenous being, you are truly strong indeed. But, it's time for us to end this right now. At that moment, the Frost Master God roared out, causing a formidable frost aura to gush out as the entire void started contorting and freezing. Frost City, come forth and descend. Immediately, a vast power gushed out of the void beyond. When Lin Fan turned his gaze over, he could not help but put up his guard in his heart. Chapter 1155 The Buddha Ancestor Arrives. Chapter 1155 The Buddha Ancestor Arrives. From the depths of the void, a frost city started to take shape. It looked as though it was far away and extremely close at the same time, seemingly able to descend at any moment now. The power of frost that was rippling over from it was even giving Lin Fan an alarming feeling somehow. Not wanting to drag this out any further, the Frost Master God had deployed her killer move right away. There were already countless Master Gods that had fallen by now, so, this was a war that must not be allowed to drag any further. If this went on, it might just end up with both sides sustaining heavy losses. The reason why the Master Gods had such an interest toward the Endless Mainland was because the Master of Chaos had once left behind a prophecy. The encounter for them to break through from being Master Gods was contained within the Endless Mainland. Some of the Master Gods weren't all that bothered about breaking through their cultivation states at all. After all, they were already the utmost beings back in the Moon Shadow Mainland. However, the development of the Moon Shadow Mainland was simply way too rapid. With the blooming population, the land and resources they had were no longer able to sustain the amount of people present. As for the Master Gods that were in a rush to break through to become Master of Chaoses, all of them wanted to know just what sort of encounter lay in wait for them in the Endless Mainland. As the old Masters and the Master Gods were exchanging blows, they could not help but break into a shiver when they felt the spreading power of frost, retreating away to make a path immediately. Within the void, all that was left was a patch of whiteness as the whole space was covered with frost. Under the call of the Frost Master God, a majestic frost city appeared above the heads of everyone. Even the barriers that were laid out by the Frost Master God herself were shattered immediately under the pressure of this frost city. Noticing that the old masters wanted to head over, Lin Fan waved them off with his hand. None of you come over. This isn't something that any of you can defend against. The auras of Zheng Yangtian and the others had already started to diminish down gradually. This fight with the Master Gods had all the old masters expending their fullest strengths and deploying countless of methods. Those Master Gods were extremely bothersome to deal with indeed. Each time they wanted to kill a Master God, there had to be an old master to fall as well. In fact, because some of the master gods had moves that were exceptionally crafty, the old masters themselves had taken on quite a loss. There were quite a number of them that were beaten so badly that even their consciousnesses were destroyed entirely. A single look over and one could see that there were merely around 20 old masters left. As for the side of the Moon Shadow mainland, there were only 13 of them remaining. This was an extremely miserable state of affairs. A war as such that was just destroying the foundations of both sides had rendered the void completely devastated since a while ago, with void currents just gushing out all over the place. If anyone below the immortal king state were to arrive here, they would most likely be engulfed within the chaos of the void currents. Frost Master God, now that we've already come to this point, there's no way we can just call it quits. If you have any more capabilities, take them out then, Lin Fan remarked coldly. His face, which was once filled with nothing but cheeky expressions, was now somber and serious. He could no longer find the emotions to feel happiness anymore. There were simply way too many that had died in this war. Indigenous being, as long as you are to die, there will no longer be a match for us in the entire endless mainland. The Frost Master God spread her arms wide apart, causing a power of frost to gush into that frost city. There were many ice sculptures contained within that vast, majestic frost city. However, they were all shattered at this moment as everything flowed inside it. It seemed as though there was an energy channeling within it. At this moment, the big ancient demon appeared before Lin Fan, looking over at that frost city up above him with an unyielding gaze. Lin Fan was stunned. What are you trying to do? The big ancient demon did not turn his head around. Instead, he replied grimly, I can feel that the power contained within that thing is extremely strong. If it were to self-destruct, you might most likely not be able to block it. Lin Fan peered at the big ancient demon. If I'm unable to block against it, will you be able to? The big ancient demon replied without a single trace of fear still, no, I wouldn't either. But, I will use my life to fend against it. Lin Fan stood in front of the big ancient demon. Back down, there's nothing for you here. The big ancient demon shook his head before replying with a low tone, I will not back down. You created me. Even though I've never ever enjoyed a true battle, today, you have allowed me to experience the glory that I once had back when I conquered the infinite worlds. Those words that came forth were absolutely groundbreaking. When the old masters heard that, they could feel their entire bodies shuddering momentarily. None of them could have expected that a weapon spirit would be able to spout out such a statement. This was simply worth respecting. However, they were astounded with what happened in the next second as well. Lin Fan grabbed the back of the big ancient demon's head and flung him far to the back. Get on one side, this is not the place for you to throw your life. In a split second, Lin Fan stomped down onto the ground with a single foot as a boundless power erupted out of his body. He then glared at the Frost Master God with an extremely cold look. You wish to suppress me with this Frost City? We'll just have to see if you've got the capabilities to do so then. Furthermore, do you really think that I will give you the chance to do so? Full power. Boom. His aura was just like a dragon that soared up into the heavens ferociously. Moving his body nimbly, Lin Fan then bolted out to suppress the Frost Master God with all his might. The Frost Master God narrowed her gaze at Lin Fan as that peerlessly beautiful face of hers smirked out with a cold scoff while she raised a single finger. Oh, foolish indigenous being. Do you really think that this is a self-destruction? You're wrong. I'm merely gathering all the powers of your Master God to penetrate through you. Shing. In that instant, the Frost City disintegrated completely as everything converged down toward the Frost Master God. There was a single spot of frost light that was glowing out faintly. However, Lin Fan knew that just within that single point of light was an extremely threatening power. And don't you dare think about hiding into that smelt of yours. The moment you do so, this power will definitely be more than enough to annihilate all of those other indigenous beings behind you. Lin Fan froze for a moment as his expression took on a faint change before he chuckled out coldly, HMPH. You're thinking too much now. You expect me to hide within my smelt with just this amount of power from you? You must really be thinking way too highly of yourself. Die then, the Frost Master God roared out as the tremendous power of frost pounced over with an extreme ferocity. Lin Fan heaved in a deep breath of air as his body burst forth with a blinding brilliance. But right at that moment, a weird phenomenon appeared. From the endless void, a Buddha palm crushed down and pushed out at the Frost Master God. Right then, the Frost Master God's entire focus was placed on Lin Fan. When she suddenly sensed that tremendous power coming forth at her, she was shocked for a flash and spun around to receive it. But to her surprise, she realized that there was completely no way to block that Buddha palm at all. Bam! As it landed squarely onto her body, she was sent flying away immediately. Lin Fan was equally flabbergasted by the scene before him. Just what in the world was going on here? All of a sudden, a boundless Buddha voice boomed out of the void. Frost Master God, what guts you have to try and kill someone that your lord here intends to kill personally? That voice. Boundless future Buddha Lord. Lin Fan had not expected that the boundless future Buddha Lord would actually appear at a moment as such. Deep in his heart, he knew that the latter would definitely come at the end of the day. However, Lin Fan had assumed that moment to be when both sides had sustained grave injuries in this fight, and not right now. Being struck by this palm strike of the boundless future Buddha Lord, the Frost Master God coughed out a big mouthful of fresh blood. With a single cracking sound, even the god core within her body had broken apart. Lin Fan caught the Frost Master God in his arms, feeling extremely astonished in his heart. He knew of the strength of the Frost Master God. For the boundless future Buddha Lord to be able to break her god core with just a single strike, what sort of a level must that strength be at? You. The Frost Master God glared up in the void while huffing heavily. At this moment, she did not even mind being supported up by Lin Fan. The entire void was radiating with a Buddha light as an evil gleam flickered by the surroundings. This golden black light shone down onto the entire world as a series of evil Buddha voices drifted out, enveloping the entire world within completely. This was a power that had far surpassed the immortal king state. Could he have attained the Tao of the Heavenly Lord? Amitabha, why aren't ants of your level kowtowing yet as the boundless future Buddha Lord descends with his divine body? A majestic Buddha appeared between the world. However, that face of his was absolutely startling. It comprised of half a Buddha's face and half an evil one. At the same time, that initially golden lotus seat was now a blood-colored lotus seat and made up of a cluster of skulls. Menacing and threatening, it exuded a blood-curdling aura. Chapter 1156 Frightening Strength. Chapter 1156, Frightening Strength. The fact that the boundless future Buddha Lord had transformed into such a state had everyone completely stumped. Looking at the boundless future Buddha Lord up in the void, old Master Pushin could feel his mental state rattling as well. You have already turned into a complete and utter evil Buddha. The mighty voice of the boundless future Buddha Lord drifted over. What is a good Buddha? What is an evil Buddha? At the end of the day, they are all Buddhas. I am the Buddha ancestor. When I'm angry, I'm evil. When I'm quiet, I'm good. Pushin, your Buddha heart is unstable. You may wish to come under me to comprehend the wisdom of Buddhism. The heart of the old Master Pushin was quivering in fear. He could sense the vilest of all powers being emanated out of the boundless future Buddha Lord's body right now. As Buddhas, their natures should have been toward the good of things as they comprehend all the sufferings of the world. However, the body of the boundless future Buddha Lord was filled with nothing but a malevolent Buddha power at this moment. If he were to go under him, old Master Pushin might most likely turn into an evil Buddha in a split second, and from there on, descend down into the depths of the abyssal hells with the instability of his Buddha heart. Oh, benefactor that has veered onto the wrong path. You were once filled with rudeness in your words toward your Buddha ancestor. However, your Buddha ancestor is someone with a magnanimous heart, and is willing to forgive you for everything. Now that things have come to this, why aren't you coming over to bow down before the Buddha palm of your Buddha ancestor and receive your ablution? The boundless future Buddha Lord said in a majestic voice. Lin Fan's Adam's apple bobbed up and down gently as his eyes flashed with a brief look of astonishment. He then looked at the Frost Master God. Are you all right? When the Frost Master God heard that voice, she was stunned momentarily. But, as her eyes landed onto Lin Fan, she suddenly realized that her god core which was gradually breaking apart was being controlled in the palms of this indigenous being. Lin Fan spoke to her softly, I'll avenge you. You can go now. Bam! The appearance of the boundless future Buddha Lord brought forth a tremendous amount of pressure for Lin Fan. He could feel that the gap between him and the boundless future Buddha Lord was just like a great gulf that he couldn't bridge at all in his current state. Now that the Frost Master God had landed in his hands, the only thing he could do was hurry and kill her. His experience points were about to be full right now, and Lin Fan could only hope that this could become his last shot at life. The Frost Master God had not thought that things would actually come to this. In fact, she had not even thought that she would actually die such a tragic death as her eyes gradually lost every bit of light in them. However, she seemed as though there was a single memory being stirred in her last moments. Those cherry lips of hers pursed slightly as Lin Fan listened carefully. However, he could not make out what she was saying except for two mere words. Heavenly Lord, ding, congratulations on killing Frost Master God. Ding. Experience points plus. Looking at the experience points gained, Lin Fan's eyes could not help but let out a glint of disappointment. That bit. He was just lacking in that bit. Pishu. His gaze spun and locked onto the remaining 13 master gods. If he were able to have all of them slain, his experience points should most probably be able to reach its endpoint. But, with the boundless future Buddha Lord standing in front of him right now, how was he supposed to go take them down? Fight with my life, boundless future Buddha Lord, to think that you would still dare to show your face. Could you not be afraid of my treasure any longer? Lin Fan looked at the boundless future Buddha Lord and taunted him coldly. Looking over at Lin Fan, the face of the boundless future Buddha Lord was totally impassionate. In fact, he didn't even have the slightest bit of worry. You wanting to revolt against your Buddha ancestor is akin to an ant wanting to topple a tree. Someone that overestimates their strength. Lin Fan heaved in a deep breath of air as he could not help but feel worried in his heart. The feeling that the boundless future Buddha Lord was giving off right now was way too profound and supernatural. Could this be what the Tao of the Heavenly Lord was like? However, Lin Fan could not wait any longer at this point. Moving nimbly, a white-colored object appeared in his hand. Soap. Pishu. The soap bolted out toward the boundless future Buddha Lord in a flash. But for some reason, Lin Fan could not shrug off the feeling that the soap would actually lose its effects. But at that moment, Lin Fan was just bolting out for the remaining 13 master gods. Without showing any bit of mercy, he unleashed every single ounce of his powers as he beat them down. When the boundless future Buddha Lord appeared, those 13 master gods were already long dumbfounded over the situation. When they caught sight of the Frost Master God falling, they were in an even greater daze at that point. Die! Lin Fan roared out. With a single palm strike, he enveloped all the remaining master gods together. After he killed the Frost Master God, his powers had taken an extreme leap. With that, killing these master gods now was a really easy task for him. When the master gods caught a whiff of this tremendous power, their faces let out expressions of shock as they tried their hardest to put up a fight. But, in the face of absolute might, they seemed like nothing more than ants. Ding! Congratulations on killing Chaotic Master God. Ding! Congratulations on killing Speed Master God. ... The notifications of the system rang out endlessly. Looking at the gush of the experience points, Lin Fan was filled with anticipation in his heart. It must fill up. Following the notifications of the system, Lin Fan's experience bar was pushing up rapidly. Looking at the experience points approaching their final tick, Lin Fan's heart was just pounding with excitement right now. Ding! Experience points are full. Lin Fan's heart leapt with joy. It's finally full. However, he found himself freezing up before long. There was no sign of any continuation from the system. With the experience points filling up, shouldn't his strength rise along with it? How could this be as such now? Lin Fan could feel his heart despairing somewhat right now. He then cast his sight up into the void, hoping that the soap could work. But when his gaze landed there, he was stunned completely once again. The boundless future Buddha Lord had grabbed the soap in his hand. Lin Fan could see that there were an endless number of threads that were connecting the body of the boundless future Buddha Lord with the soap. However, there seemed to be some mysterious power that was blocking those threads as well. Bang! Squeezing his palm, the boundless future Buddha Lord crushed the soap entirely as it turned into dust before scattering out into the rest of the world. Indeed, this is a really mystifying object. However, everything shall vanish like smoke in the face of your Buddha ancestor. The boundless future Buddha Lord looked at Lin Fan. In those deep, abyssal Buddha eyes of his was a glint of cruel mockery. Right now, Lin Fan was truly feeling a bottomless void in his heart. FCKED. He was truly FCKED this time around. The soap was a legendary item created by the system. How could it be useless? At this moment, the boundless future Buddha Lord was just like a god that wielded absolute control over the infinite worlds. The gaze he was using to look at Lin Fan with was just akin to looking at an ant as his lips curled up with a toying look. Kneel down. Get lost. Lin Fan bellowed out. Zhang Yangtian looked over at Lin Fan. You leave. We'll hold him off for you. As long as you're alive, there will always be hope. Lin Fan shook his head. There's no way of leaving at all. The boundless future Buddha Lord gave off a cold chuckle. That's right. There's no way you guys can leave. All of you vile demons of the wrong path had been rather rude to your Buddha ancestor. Since that's the case, I shall send you guys down to the Avachi Hells then. The boundless future Buddha Lord flipped his palm, and an Avachi Hell instantly appeared within that Buddha palm of his, looking malevolent and dark just like a sinister abyss. Come on then. Opening his mouth gently, the boundless future Buddha Lord sent forth a formidable invisible force. With that, one of the old masters started convulsing as his body flew out toward the former, no longer of his control anymore. Bam! In the next instant, that old master flew right into the Avachi hell in the hands of the boundless future Buddha Lord. Within it, his body was coiled up by all sorts of steel chains as he underwent an endless amount of ordeals. Bam! Before the masses could even register that fact in their mind, that old master exploded out into nothingness. Purge your sins and enter the Buddha world. The boundless future Buddha Lord continued speaking softly. Lin Fan took everything before him into his mind. He had not expected that the strength of the boundless future Buddha Lord would actually turn this formidable as he gripped both his fists tightly. Boundless future Buddha Lord, go to hell. Looking over at Lin Fan, the face of the boundless future Buddha Lord shone with disdain. Extending out a single golden finger, he penetrated through the void, causing the entire world to seem as though it was nothing but that single finger at this moment. Lin Fan started cussing out at this guy's mother in his heart. Why did he always have to meet such twisted FCKs? Channeling the strongest powers from the depths of his heart, he gathered and hurled them out in the form of a punch. Bam! A vast power poured out of him as the chi within Lin Fan rumbled out furiously. In the next moment, his body was being pushed back by the ferocious aftershock. By the time he came to a stop, he found that his arm was just disintegrating rapidly before eventually turning into nothingness. Damn it, so darn strong. In the blink of an eye, he regrew his arm. While it wasn't much damage right there, how should he go about things at this point? This boundless future Buddha Lord was truly too darn strong. However, yours truly will never ever admit defeat. Chapter 1157 Fight with his life. Chapter 1157 Fight with his life. Lin Fan truly had enough of everything. Each time he reached the end, there would always be a twisted FCK of an existence that would come and take him down. From the very beginning, the Frost Master God was sick enough. And well, one could just look at what the world brought out. The boundless future Buddha Lord. Not only that, he was even more powerful than before. Each one of them was just one sicker than the other. There was just no way to fight anymore. In the face of this boundless Buddha power, Lin Fan truly did not know what he could do anymore, or how he should fight on. Hell, how should he even start an attack? Even though the boundless future Buddha Lord was merely just surveying everything, the rage in his heart had not dispersed in the slightest bit. From the very moment he caught sight of Lin Fan when he appeared, he was already filled with hatred in his heart. This was a fella had already brought for him an endless amount of ridicule from the first time they had ever met. This was especially the case for the sufferings that he had to endure in the Buddha pool. He wanted Lin Fan to repay it 1,000 times, no, 10,000 times over. While that Buddha pool was filled with an endless amount of power, it was filled with an equally endless cesspool of torments. It was the place where the wills of the evil Buddhas lay. Every single one of the mental consciousnesses that remained was struck at his spirits. If not for the fact that his mind was resolute enough, he might have long sunken down with them. But now that everything had passed, he possessed an absolute power, a horrifyingly unbridled power. All of these fellas before him were nothing but ants that he could smash down with a single wave of his palm. How about now? Do you still wish to resist? The boundless future Buddha Lord asked with contempt. Lin Fan swung his arms while his mind started to race furiously. Just what in the world should he do right now? Between them, the difference was as great as the heaven and earth. In terms of power, there was definitely no way he could fight this guy at all. His entire path till this point had been through the assistance of the system. But now, things had suddenly come to a point where he found his experience points filled completely, yet he was unable to level up. If he were to become a heavenly lord right now, what else did he have to be afraid of? Furthermore, all of his various tricks might most likely not work against the boundless future Buddha Lord in his current state. If the latter were someone just like any of those other fools with a low intellect, there might probably be a chance of getting him slain. But, given the way things were right now, that chance was practically as good as gone. Boundless future Buddha Lord, just what in the world do you want? Lin Fan asked while slowly gathering his powers bit by bit. Ha ha ha, the boundless future Buddha Lord suddenly roared out in laughter. That dignified Buddha body of his was extremely solemn, yet that laughter of his was just infinitely chilling for everyone who heard it. When the laughter came to a stop, that face of his changed starkly as well. I want you dead, but before that, I want you to witness everyone around you dying one after another. Get over here. All of a sudden, the entire world surged with a power that was impossible to block, leaving Zheng Yangtian and the others just astounded by it. They could feel themselves being tugged with an invisible force that rendered them totally helpless, leaving them without a single bit of chance of fighting back at all. One after another, these figures flew out toward the boundless future Buddha Lord. When Lin Fan caught sight of that, he clenched his teeth furiously as he swept his robes, causing the heaven and earth smelt to burst forth into the world right away, encapsulating Zheng Yangtian and the others in it. He then roared out, "Don't you get too cocky now." Bam! In a flash, Lin Fan struck out at the boundless future Buddha Lord. The boundless future Buddha Lord merely shrugged his head. The oceans of sufferings are boundless. Repent and you shall receive salvation. What sort of capabilities do you think that you possess that enables you to pit yourself against your Buddha ancestor here? Nefarious sin of suppression. The void was immediately torn apart by a berserk power, and the only thing that could be seen was a Buddha palm that crushed down along with a formidable might. In the eyes of your Buddha ancestor, you are nothing but an ant. However, your Buddha ancestor will let you experience the meaning of true power. Bam! With those words, a single heaven-encompassing palm flew over. In the face of this incoming Buddha palm, Lin Fan could not help but feel pressured in his heart. Within the heaven and earth smelt. Looking at everything before them, Zheng Yangtian and the others felt flustered in their hearts as well. They could tell that Lin Fan was not a match for the boundless future Buddha Lord. What should we do now? He is not a match for that evil Buddha at all. There's no other way out. The boundless future Buddha Lord has already turned into a heavenly lord. While it is only a difference of a single cultivation state between immortal kings and heavenly lords, the difference between the two is undeniably tantamount to the heavens. Damn it, why would he be the one to break through to the heavenly lord state? ... A single tremendous palm struck the ground. N-O-V-E in .c ohm. Even with his fullest powers gathered in retaliation, Lin Fan could not defend against it at all. This was no longer a fight of the same level. The entire world quaked while the ground cracked asunder. Under the might of that formidable palm strike, the entire ground collapsed and caved in, forming a gigantic pit. The authority of that palm was not to be looked down upon. Amitabha, the boundless future Buddha Lord merely viewed everything in nonchalance. To him, that lad was no longer capable enough of standing at par with him. He wanted to toy to his heart's content right now so that he could teach that lad the true meaning of despair. Within the deep pit, Lin Fan laid sprawling with blood all over his body. It was now that he understood just how enormous of a strength that was. With that single palm strike, his entire body was seemingly wrapped up in an incomprehensible power, such that he didn't even have the will to fight back any longer. If not for the fact that his physical body state was tremendously strong, he might have just dissipated like smoke with just that palm strike alone. Damn it, Lin Fan gripped his fingers tightly as the mythical parasol tree throbbed with life force. However, he had already expended most of the life force with the previous fight. As such, the amount that was produced right now could barely produce any effects at all. Creak. At that moment, a series of tears started appearing on the surface of the mythical parasol tree. After that, blood started spilling out before his entire body suddenly burst forth with a tremendous amount of power that seemed to be everlasting and all-encompassing. Master, fight on, I'm going to sleep now. When Lin Fan heard that voice, he was stumped, unable to react to it at all. The mythical parasol tree, why would it have a voice? Sensing the condition within his body right now, Lin Fan caught sight of an elf the size of a palm hidden beneath a leaf at the topmost portion of the mythical parasol tree. However, it was shrinking at this moment before eventually dissipating out. Eventually, the mythical parasol tree disappeared, turning into nothing but a seed. Just like when he had first obtained the mythical parasol tree, it had returned to its foremost state. As for the blood that was spilling out from within the mythical parasol tree, it formed a sphere with a boundless life force was spreading out from within it. This was the source of life from the mythical parasol tree that was being dedicated out at this moment. Yours truly has worked tirelessly to groom my mythical parasol tree into one that's strong and healthy. To think that it would be destroyed back to its core just like that. F***CK, boundless future Buddha Lord, yours truly swears that I will not be a human until I kill you. As Lin Fan's body was healing up, so were his wounds. Boundless future Buddha Lord, you're taking yours truly as an ant, Yours truly will show you just what sort of capabilities I possess. Bang, cracks rippled through the surface of the earth just like the back of a turtle's shell as Lin Fan's entire body spun itself upward, bursting forth with countless immortal arts mystic skills. The entire world was suddenly filled with a glowing brilliance as it delved into the midst of those immortal arts mystic skills. The gaze of the boundless future Buddha Lord narrowed for a moment, to think that this lad would have managed to recover from the strike. He pointed out gently with a single finger to pierce through the heaven and earth. However, for Lin Fan, that single finger alone was more than enough to push him to his edge. How in the world could the difference between their strengths be this great? God damn it! Heaven and Earth Sutra. Instantly, the Heaven and Earth Sutra danced in the sky as a series of golden text characters floated out gently in the void. The boundless future Buddha Lord shook his head in disapproval. Heaven and Earth Sutra, that is far, far from being enough. Raising his head, Lin Fan heaved in a huge breath of air. Don't you get too smug now. Yours truly is definitely going to come at you with my life today. Blood burn. Swinging his arm, essence blood from within Lin Fan's body sprayed out. Ever since the firmament blood had been infused into his body, Lin Fan had never ever tried burning it before. The damage done to his body from this would be way too great, as it was an act of expending his very own life. When the Heaven and Earth Sutra text characters came into contact with his blood, they started going into a frenzy. Every single text character shone off with a bedazzling light before everything combined together. Chapter 1158 Impossible. Chapter 1158, Impossible. This was the strongest power that Lin Fan could deploy right now, and was a method of fighting with the most disregard for his own life as well. It was something that would cause himself 800 points of damage for every 1000 points of damage to the enemy. Not worthwhile. It was simply way too unworthwhile. That initially calm expression on the face of the boundless future Buddha Lord suddenly took on a stark change as his Buddha face screwed up slightly. Heavenly Lord Shinfeng. Boom. The heaven and earth broke apart as an infinite amount of power gushed through. The power exuded from the Heaven and Earth Sutra converged into a ball and rushed out at this moment. With that, a single image of a heavenly figure started to take shape. As it extended out his palm, it was as though the power of the entire world was contained within his hands, blocking the Buddha finger of the boundless future Buddha Lord gently. Bang! A desecrating amount of power erupted from the collision of absolute powers, the force produced from the impact being enough to rattle the entire world. Heavenly Lord Shinfeng. When the boundless future Buddha Lord caught sight of that person, it was as though he could not believe his eyes at all. However, he rejected that thought in his mind right away as well. No, this can't be Heavenly Lord Shinfeng. This is merely an image projected from his consciousness. Lin Fan looked at the illusory figure that was standing up in the void. While he felt a little shaken over this as well, he could not really think too much about anything by this point anymore. Attack. Now that the chance had come, why was it not attacking yet? Furthermore, Lin Fan's strength was dipping by the moment. It wouldn't be long before he would enter his weakest state. If he could not take down the boundless future Buddha Lord by then, it would truly be way too late for anything else. The boundless future Buddha Lord barked out in rage, "What can a mere consciousness projection do to me?" A maddened howl boomed out as a power that was even greater than before burst forth. Lin Fan threw out a single punch and hurled it over. But for the boundless future Buddha Lord, it was akin to something scratching an itch of his, leaving not even the slightest trace of pressure on him. To think that even an ant would dare to strike out at your Buddha ancestor. Courting death, the boundless future Buddha Lord snorted out coldly as a gigantic Buddha palm appeared from behind his body and crushed down on Lin Fan fiercely. Ugh! Lin Fan could only feel the blood inside his body going into a berserk rage as a result of the absolute powers that were disrupting it from within. The life force provided by the mythical parasol tree started to gush forth as it healed up his body's wounds rapidly. The heavenly might of Heavenly Lord Shinfeng was boundless as the boundless future Buddha Lord found himself being pushed back by it. However, it was still unable to suppress the latter thoroughly. Heavenly Lord Shinfeng then cast his sight over into the distance. As he pointed out with his finger, a ripple burst forth. Boom! From far in the distance, a mysterious aura drifted over as a gigantic secret ground instantly appeared before everyone's faces. When the boundless future Buddha Lord caught sight of this, he felt his heart clench a little, not knowing what this was. But when Lin Fan caught sight of that secret ground, he was stunned. This was the ancient saint world and the infinite worlds. Heavenly Lord Shinfeng spoke up, "If you wish to become a heavenly lord, you will have to recover all of your source. Refine it and have everything return to your body as one. That will complete your Heavenly Lord ascension." Lin Fan was rooted for a moment as he cast his sight at Heavenly Lord Shinfeng and then at the secret ground. He scolded out in rage, "FCK off. Yours truly does not have to sacrifice my own family to accomplish the Tao of the Heavenly Lord. Even without ascending into the Heavenly Lord state, I will be able to slay this bald monk." The moment the boundless future Buddha Lord heard those words, he turned his sight toward that vast secret ground that was floating out in the void right now. Was this where the source of Heavenly Lord Shinfeng lay? Ha ha ha, the boundless future Buddha Lord roared out manically, power of source. Your Buddha ancestor here shall accept it with pleasure then. At that moment, the boundless future Buddha Lord spread his hands wide open, blanketing the entire world and grabbing out at the secret ground. Courting death, Lin Fan struck back immediately. However, for the boundless future Buddha Lord, this was nothing more than an insignificant effort of anger produced by an ant. Heavenly Lord Shinfeng raised his finger as a bright light shrouded the entire secret ground, protecting it within. He then turned over to look at Lin Fan. He is not your final enemy. Even if you triumph over him, it is useless. Lin Fan froze for a moment before catching the gaze of Heavenly Lord Shinfeng. What do you mean by that? The boundless future Buddha Lord came to a halt as well. You. He then roared out in laughter thereafter, ha ha ha. This is the pinnacle of jokes. Useless to triumph over me. Could there actually be anyone stronger than your Buddha ancestor in this entire universe? After he was done with those words, the boundless future Buddha Lord wanted to continue further. However, a single person suddenly came into his mind. Impossible. Definitely impossible. Eventually, he turned his eyes toward Heavenly Lord Shinfeng and Lin Fan. You guys are spouting way too much nonsense. The both of you can just go to hell. Infinite evil Buddha, purify. The boundless future Buddha Lord then let out a maddened bark as the entire world was suddenly encapsulated within a Buddhist power that was filled with a supernaturally evil aura. He was deploying his ultimate move right now, bent on killing everyone around here. Heavenly Lord Shinfeng said calmly, I'll hold him off. You can just use the heaven and earth smelt to take him down. Lin Fan's brows furrowed as he complained in his heart, ha. Talk is cheap. How could things be that simple in reality? However, even if that were the case, it was his final hope as well. The boundless future Buddha Lord had not expected that at a moment as such, the consciousness projection of Heavenly Lord Shinfeng would actually be triggered into awakening by the Heaven and Earth Sutra. Damn it, god damn it, wasn't this just a mere projection? Yet, the power contained in it was so darned formidable. He was someone who had absorbed every single bit of power in that Buddha pool. How could he lose out to a mere projection? Heavenly Lord Shinfeng, I refuse to believe that you can actually take me down. The boundless future Buddha Lord roared out in a furious rage. However, Heavenly Lord Shinfeng was floating up in the void as he lifted his finger gently and caused the void around him to take on a sudden change. With that, a book and brush floated out in the void. First, was chaos. Then, came the heavens. And before all of that, Heavenly Lord Shinfeng, everything that happened in this world is but a story written down by your Lord here to form an endless number of worlds through gathering my unrivaled will. Your fates have long been sealed through the books. Everyone has their own destiny, and yours is set. Fighting it will be nothing but futile efforts. At that moment, the mysterious book that was floating up in the heavens suddenly started flipping open. Every single page that was flipped by had images appearing one after another. These were all the events that were happening in the entire world at every single given moment. When it flipped to the last page, the image that was shown was the figure of the boundless future Buddha Lord. When the latter saw how the figure of himself in that image had fallen to this lad, he became totally frenzied. Impossible. I am the boundless future Buddha ancestor. How could I possibly be created? I refuse to believe that. Go to hell. The boundless future Buddha Lord had gone entirely deranged by now. For someone to tell him right now that he was nothing more than an existence crafted out by someone else, what sort of a blow was that? Did that mean to say that his fate had always been in the control of someone else out there? There was no way Lin Fan could be bothered with all of this right now. Whether or not he was made up, the boundless future Buddha Lord would have to die no matter what. With that, a single fist flew out toward the head of the boundless future Buddha Lord. Impossible. You guys are trying to deceive me. Bam. The boundless future Buddha Lord grabbed Lin Fan's arm as he glared at him and snarled out, "These must be tricks that you've come up with, lad. Everything in those images is made up." Lin Fan raised his head and looked at the images before roaring out as well, "Prepare to die." Shing. From the void, a sword will instantly sliced off Lin Fan's arm. That arm of his which was severed away held on to the 9-5 legendary brick as it slammed onto the boundless future Buddha Lord's head. Piok. The 9-5 legendary brick had hit the target right on the mark. Seeing this, Lin Fan's face shone with a tired smile. His combo here was really strong indeed. At that moment, Lin Fan did not hesitate as he let Zheng Yangtian and the others out of the heaven and earth smelt immediately before heading over to take down the boundless future Buddha Lord. 1. Lin Fan shouted out in ecstasy. When Zheng Yangtian and the others caught sight of that, they cheered out in excitement as well. They had truly won. Right then, Heavenly Lord Shinfeng spoke up. No, this merely spells the end of the story that your lord here has written. The final changes are still undergoing. With that, the entire masses froze up. Lin Fan looked at Heavenly Lord Shinfeng. Don't come and try to scare me off. I'm not scaring anyone off. Those are the facts. Heavenly Lord Shinfeng shook his head before casting his sight into the void. Everything happening to you guys till this point was merely a beginning. Lin Fan shook his head. I don't understand. Just what in the world are you trying to say? Heavenly Lord Shinfeng's face then turned extremely grim. Let me tell you then. Chapter 1159 End. The End. Chapter 1159, The End. Lin Fan was completely dumbfounded by now, finding himself at a complete loss toward the situation. Just what sort of an existence was Heavenly Lord Shinfeng? Lin Fan could not figure out anything at all right now. Zheng Yangtian and the others looked at Heavenly Lord Shinfeng while feeling absolutely taken aback. Once one was to cultivate themselves up to a certain state, they would know that the strongest existence in this entire world was none other than Heavenly Lord Shinfeng. And now that they were catching sight of him right before their very eyes, they were naturally beyond ecstatic and emotional. As Heavenly Lord Shinfeng was relaying everything to them, he lifted his finger gently as the door of the secret ground burst open immediately. Let all of them come out then. It should be upon them as to how they decide on this matter. Boom! Lin Fan turned his sight toward the secret ground right away, his eyes filled with excitement, anticipation, and even nervousness. A series of light beams streaked out as the entire secret ground was shrouded in a beautiful aurora. They're finally coming out. Lin Fan could not help but feel somewhat flustered in his heart as his lips twitched left and right ever so gently. It had been a long, long time since he had seen them now, and he wondered how they were doing right now. Zheng Yangtian and the others did not know what was going on. However, they could feel as though many living beings were coming out from within that aurora. Where is this place? Have we gotten out yet? He did it. We're finally out of that secret ground. One after another, those figures appeared in the world. As Lin Fan's gaze focused over, he found countless of ever so familiar figures. Fire Water Empress, Zan Yongxian, Chiki, Mie Chongqi, Zhang Ergo, Zhi Chao, Demonic God Pangu, so on and so forth. Oh oi! As he caught sight of those familiar figures, Lin Fan's Adam's apple bobbed slightly as he could not help but shout out at them. Amidst the crowd, Zan Yongxian was looking all around, wondering where in the place this was. When that voice rang out all of a sudden, that clamoring crowd fell into a deep silence immediately. When Zan Yongxian's vision landed onto that figure standing in the distance, emotion surged through the very depths of her heart. Hubby. The Fire Water Empress stood there as well. When she caught sight of Lin Fan, her gaze softened as though she was slowly gathering her memories after this long separation. Lin Fan pulled Zan Yongxian into his embrace and stroked her silky hair before turning his size over at the Fire Water Empress. Aren't you coming over? The Fire Water Empress merely gave a cold harumph as she tossed her head aside. She was an empress, so how could she possibly behave as such? But when she caught sight of Lin Fan's eyes which were filled with anticipation, she then briskly walked over. Just this once, take it was a reward for this reunion after a long time then. Hugging one of them in each arm, Lin Fan's face revealed a bright smile. Thereafter, Zhi Chao and Yu Juling came over and gathered beside him, each of them looking at their master hopefully. It had been a long, long time since they had seen their master, and they were emotional to the point that tears of happiness were flowing down the sides of their eyes. Zan Yongxian raised her head gently. You've done it. Lin Fan nodded his head in reply. I will never ever let you guys down. Cuckoo. The small little chickie was sprinting over furiously from far in the distance, digging his little claws deep into the earth as quickly as he could the moment he caught sight of Lin Fan. With tears flowing down both sides of his head, he leapt onto Lin Fan's shoulder with a single pounce and rubbed his head against his cheek with a wild fervor. Lin Fan could only chuckle out, it's been such a long time, and yet you still haven't grown up a single bit. What am I to do with you? Chiki shook his head continuously without replying, merely choosing to rest it against Lin Fan's cheek. Demonic God Pangu stepped forth. Mother *Sea King Human King, you've finally done it. The great sage came over as well. The gaze he met Lin Fan with was one filled with excitement. They had finally left that gigantic prison. From now on, the boundaries of this great heaven and earth out there were for them to explore. In other words, they were no longer bound by any restrictions. All of a sudden, there were some commotion breaking out in the crowd. The Devil's Incarnate is here. What? Even the Devil's Incarnate has managed to get out. Uncle, save me. At that moment, a figure bolted out of the crowd frantically. Lin Fan turned his gaze over. To think that it would be that lad, Wang Xiaoming, the destined foe of all the destined children of the world. Your strength has grown by a decent deal, huh lad? Lin Fan chuckled out. Wang Xiaoming shook his head furiously. Uncle Lin, you must definitely save me this time around. Lin Fan merely continued laughing without replying. One after another, people he was familiar with were appearing together. Mie Changqi, Zhang Ergo, etc., everyone gathered around him in a circle. While it might have merely been a few years since Lin Fan had arrived at this place, for those from the ancient Saint world and the Xuanwang world, this was a reunion of nearly 100 years. Time often flew by at the speed of light, causing great changes to happen in between. But now that they were reunited once more, everyone could not help but feel a great sense of relief. Heavenly Lord Xinfeng stood there and raised his head, his brows frowning slightly. He had sensed that a patch of chaos was breaking out somewhere before he spoke up. It's coming. Lin Fan was stunned. What's coming? The beginning, or the end has arrived. Quote. Heavenly Lord Xinfeng spoke with a grim tone. He then looked around at the group of living beings. Your Lord has already said this. Everything, every single thing, has merely been a story that was written by your Lord. However, there would always be deviations in every story, and anomalies in the factors. The first factor was you, while the second factor was chaos. Initially, everything would have been fine. However, at the point of completion for the story, right when the infinite worlds were being crafted out, the endless spacetime was disturbed, causing an endless amount of wills to gush forth. From there, the biggest change that happened was none other than the system, which infused itself into your body. In a way, you may have been that biggest change in itself, or perhaps, it might have been the change that completed you instead. Regardless, the fall of the boundless future Buddha Lord should have been the final chapter of things. However, due to all the changes, he was no longer the same variable he was. The first time it happened, your Lord had entered the story personally, using every single bit of my powers to try and fight the changes from within. However, your Lord failed. Even though we managed to take down the Master of Chaos eventually together with the Buddha ancestor, the two of us fell as a result. As for the Master of Chaos, his body was sealed in a place none other than the depths of the Buddha pool abyss. Listening to everything that Heavenly Lord Xinfeng said, Lin Fan felt that his mind was about to be blown. What the FCK? This and that, nothing made sense to him at all. You're the one writing your own story, so what the FCK has it got to do with you? Even if it goes wrong, why should it concern you? However, there was one thing Lin Fan understood from it, the system. Heavenly Lord Xinfeng knew about the existence of the system as well. However, whether he was the system in itself or whether the system was him, that was something that even Heavenly Lord Xinfeng himself did not know for sure. As for Lin Fan himself, there was no way he could know it himself then. Boom! Right at that moment, an extremely horrifying power drifted over from the void far in the distance. Compared to the boundless future Buddha Lord, this power was more frightening by at least 1,000,000 times. Lin Fan's heart tightened up, unable to believe everything at all. Heavenly Lord Xinfeng looked at Lin Fan. Your Lord does not know whether you are a creation of the source of your Lord directly, or that you are the system in itself and was born by borrowing the powers of your Lord's source. There is probably no way of knowing that. However, the Master of Chaos is about to be born right now. If you wish to take down the Master of Chaos, you will have to absorb the source of your Lord into your body completely and accomplish your Tao of the Heavenly Lord. Lin Fan waved it off with his hand. Say no more. That's impossible. No matter how strong this Master of Chaos you speak of is, I will never ever sacrifice all these people around me. They are you, and you are them. If you live on, they will live on. Should you die, they will all die. Everything, every single thing, shall perish, and from this day forth, there will be not a single person left within this entire world other than pure chaos. Heavenly Lord Xinfeng replied. Wang Xiaoming looked at Lin Fan with a confused look. Uncle Lin, what is he saying? Why can't I get any of it at all? Lin Fan waved it off dismissively once more. Don't bother about his words. He's an intellectually retarded FCKTARD. Looking at Lin Fan, Heavenly Lord Xinfeng's eyes shone with a tinge of worry. Don't choose to disbelieve in my words. The Master of Chaos isn't someone you can handle at all. He is more frightening than the boundless future Buddha Lord by 1,000,000 times. If you do not ascend to become a Heavenly Lord, you will stand no chance of winning at all. Just as Lin Fan was about to reply with something more, a figure suddenly appeared before them. That's right, Kid Xinfeng has it all right. Unless you turn into a heavenly lord, you will never ever be my match. At that moment, a black-robed figure appeared in the face of the world. Heavenly Lord Shinfeng raised his head warily with a guarded expression on his face. Right now, he was nothing more than a consciousness projection, as his main body had fallen a long time ago. Against this master of chaos, he stood no chance at all. When Lin Fan looked at that black-robed figure, his heart sunk down and blood curdled. Even though there was no aura emanating from this figure, there was an invisible force being exuded out and giving him an impossible amount of pressure. He felt like nothing more than an ant in the face of this entity. The black-robed figure removed his hood and revealed his true face. When Heavenly Lord Shinfeng caught sight of that person, his face changed. Heavenly Lord Dao Comprehension. The voice of the black-robed figure was deep and gruff. Kid Shinfeng, who is this Heavenly Lord Dao Comprehension? I am but the Master of Chaos. With that, Heavenly Lord Shinfeng snapped to a realization. I see, so that's the case. Back then, I took you down together with the Buddha ancestor. However, I could sense that there wasn't a single trace of consciousness within that shell of a body of yours. So, you had long taken over Heavenly Lord Dao Comprehension by then. The black-robed figure roared out in laughter. You're wrong, ha ha ha. I didn't take over him. He gave it up on his own accord. Heavenly Lord Dao Comprehension was indignant that he was nothing more than a character in a story written by the Heavenly Lord Shinfeng. He wanted to escape his own fate, to wield control over everything. Didn't you fall as well after entering into a story that you wrote yourself back then, Kid Shinfeng? You wanted to take control over the factors that would cause the changes, but it's a pity that you must have never ever imagined that you yourself would fail as well and fall completely. Look at all of these pitiable living beings. They must have never expected that they would be nothing more than mere characters in a story written by you, huh? They will never, ever have a destiny of their own, and it's all because everything, every single thing, has been crafted out by you. Oh, right, I'm really rambling on too much by now. My true body should be coming soon. Later on, I'll just have to devour all of you up. At that moment, I will be the one and only master to control every single thing. Far in the distance, a single black blob of meat seemed as though it was devouring everything on its way. Looking like the origin of darkness, it was just swallowing and destroying everything in existence. Also, I've really got to say, the story written by you is simply way too lousy and filled with all sorts of loopholes. That's the reason why all these changes are occurring. Perhaps, you must have never imagined that things would come to this. Entering it personally to try and fix the loopholes, who would have thought that you would fall instead? Heavenly Lord Dao Comprehension roared out in laughter as his eyes were filled with an endless mockery. Toward the great changes happening before them, all of these people who had just come out of the secret ground were left totally stumped. Under this imposing might, they were just shivering uncontrollably. This was probably what the feeling of doomsday must be like. Just what in the world is going on? We're just characters in a story. How could that be? Impossible. This is definitely impossible. Lin Fan looked at everything that was happening right now and could not help but feel at a loss in his heart, not knowing what he should do. That humongous black blob of meat was occupying the world while approaching them slowly. With that, Heavenly Lord Dao Comprehension slowly flew over toward the blob of meat. Suddenly, his body exploded out as his consciousness fused into that blob. Boom! A boundless aura erupted forth from the blob of meat, rattling the entire heaven and earth down to its core. Heavenly Lord Shinfeng spread his palm open and grabbed that secret ground. The infinite worlds within it bolted out and fused into his body. An extremely resounding and malevolent voice boomed out across the entire world. Kid Shinfeng, what use would it be for you to absorb all of your source? You are nothing but someone who has fallen. Do you really think that you can take me on with just that single trace of consciousness? Heavenly Lord Shinfeng swept his robes, and the time of the entire world seemed to have frozen over immediately. That Master of Chaos came to a halt as well. However, a clean, crisp sound still drifted out from the side of the Master of Chaos nevertheless. At that moment, Heavenly Lord Shinfeng looked at the countless of living beings that had come out of the secret ground. All of you are characters that were written out by your Lord. The infinite worlds that you reside in is also created through the source of your Lord, and all of you are none other than living beings created from the same source. If this Master of Chaos is not erased today, all of you shall vanish for all eternity. As for the final shot at life, it will be to give the source in its entirety to him. These words of Heavenly Lord Shinfeng had everyone completely frozen over. It was as though they were unable to pull themselves out of the massive news that were sinking into their minds right now. Thereafter, Heavenly Lord Shinfeng looked at the Master of Chaos that was blanketing the entire sky right now. Master of Chaos, you are an existence of the errors. An insect trying to block a vehicle, you're truly overestimating your own strength. The Master of Chaos had no mouth, no eyes, and no hands. Nothing, he was just that blob of meat. But, when Heavenly Lord Shinfeng flew out and struck at the ladder, a feeler suddenly grew out of that blob of meat, appearing before him as though it had passed through everything. Heavenly Lord Shinfeng was stunned and did not have the chance to react to it at all. Piak, with a single slap, he was turned into dust. Weak, simply way too weak. A shrill laugh came from the Master of Chaos. However, that was a laughter that sounded even more terrible than crying itself. As Heavenly Lord Shinfeng turned into dust, it turned into a ball of source that returned into Lin Fan's body. However, Lin Fan had just been standing there blankly and stupidly, not knowing what he should do at all. All of a sudden, a sound drifted over that knocked him back to his senses. All the utmost powerful beings and demonic gods of the ancient saint world were rearing their heads into the skies and laughing out. Ha ha ha, to think that at the end of the day, it would be nothing but someone else's dream. What meaning is there to that? Bang, bang, one by one, they turned into power of source and fused into Lin Fan's body. When Lin Fan caught sight of that, he yelled out right away, "Don't do that, guys. It's not real." Grandmaster, Lin Fan looked over and saw Zhang Ergo with a face full of smiles. However, he could tell that that was a smile of farewell. Actually, I could understand everything that was said. Even though I don't know whether everything that fella has said is real or not, I know that the pitch-black blob of meat is real for sure. He is really strong, so, you must win, alright. After all, you are none other than Zhang Ergo's Grandmaster. Zhang Ergo smiled out happily, and right before Lin Fan's expression of disbelief, disappeared entirely from existing moments ago. You guys, don't do that, perhaps it's all just a lie. Lin Fan bellowed out, however, it was to no avail. Wang Xiaoming looked at the destined children within the group. All of you bunch of trashes, you have been whooped down by your daddy here for dozens of years now. I'm going to give you guys a chance right now. Let's see who can return to the source the fastest. Wang Xiaoming, what are you trying to do? Lin Fan howled in rage. Wang Xiaoming looked at Lin Fan. Uncle Lin, I actually feel that the fella's words are right. That's why you must win. Bang, bang, in a flash, balls of power of source fused into Lin Fan's body freely. Zhan Yongxian laid in Lin Fan's embrace quietly. Being able to see you once more is more than enough for me. Perhaps, this is just our destiny. The Fire Water Empress looked at Zhan Yongxian. Let's go together, shall we, sister? Zhichao and Yu Juling called after, Matriarch, wait for us. Lin Fan grabbed after them immediately as he clenched down on his teeth, grinding them furiously while snarling out with a deranged expression in his eyes, no. I'll not let you guys turn into source. Zhan Yongxian merely shook her head, it's of no use, this is Providence at work. There is no escaping it. You must persevere on, alright. While he may be strong, we believe in you. Kukkaku, Chicky rubbed onto Lin Fan's cheeks before eventually hopping down reluctantly. No, under Lin Fan's distraught gaze, he witnessed those familiar smiling faces disappearing one after another. The Master of Chaos spoke. That's truly a touching scene at its best, Why would I say that something is touching? Ah, right, I am the Master of Chaos, and I encompass every single emotion with me. Look at how sad you are right now. Since that's the case, let me help you with that then. Roar. Suddenly, the Master of Chaos roared out and the world was filled with a shrill, sharp voice. Wherever this sharp voice passed, everything turned into nothingness. Unable to resist a power of that level, all the living beings exploded out before turning into the power of source and fusing into Lin Fan's body. The Master of Chaos surveyed everything. Ah, that's the way. Everything is way quieter now, isn't it? Kid Shinfeng said that you're the savior that is going to save everything. I refuse to believe that. Your strength is just simply far too weak. You can't even hold out against a single sneeze of mine. Watching everything happening before him, it was as though Lin Fan was just frozen. He then cast his sight toward the Master of Chaos. You're tired of living, aren't you? Ding. Congratulations on leveling up. Cultivation state. Heavenly Lord state. Ding. Sufficient power has been accumulated. Awaken. ... However, Lin Fan could hear nothing at this moment. He merely bolted out to kill at the Master of Chaos. Looking at the aura exuding out of Lin Fan, the Master of Chaos remarked immediately, "Ah, you've grown quite a bit stronger. But, that's still far from enough. The feeler that had grown out of the blob of meat swung out at Lin Fan once more. You mother *CKING dogs *T. Yours truly is going to annihilate you today. Piok. So weak, really now. As the feeler of the Master of Chaos swung down furiously, Lin Fan's body exploded completely. Even if the latter had broken through to the Heavenly Lord state right now, he was still not a match in the face of this frightening strength of the Master of Chaos. In fact, all it took was a single move for him to be slapped into oblivion. That kid Shinfeng is really only good at disappointments. Return to source. Ascending into a Heavenly Lord. What use was that? Still dead with one slap nevertheless. Highs. There's going to be no more living beings in this world from now on. Everything shall just be me, the Master of Chaos. What's that? At that moment, the Master of Chaos looked over at the distance and caught sight of a small spot of light, seeming as though it was skipping. Extending his feeler, he grabbed out at the spot of light. However, as the feeler approached the spot of light, a tremendous power propelled out in a flash and disintegrated it into nothingness. The Master of Chaos was alarmed. How could that be? The dump. The thud of a heartbeat resounded. In the next instant, that spot of light suddenly turned into a heart. Thereafter, something else grew out of it, and it gradually took on the shape of a human figure. When the Master of Chaos caught sight of that face, he was slightly taken aback. This guy isn't dead yet. Lin Fan opened his eyes as he looked at everything around him. Where is this place? Am I Lin Fan? Am I Heavenly Lord Shinfeng? Oh, right. I'm the system. I'm Lin Fan, as well as the system. I am a series of endless wills that have gathered. I am Lin Fan. At that moment, a brilliant glint of light shone out of Lin Fan's eyes. I am Lin Fan, neither Heavenly Lord Shinfeng, nor his reincarnation. I'm not a character written in his story either. I am that greatest factor. Boom. With those words, an unprecedented aura burst out of Lin Fan's body. When the Master of Chaos sensed that aura, he was astonished. So strong, so darn strong, I want to leave this place. At that moment, Lin Fan had awakened completely. Regaining his true sense of self, he cast his gaze at the Master of Chaos. Damned blob of meat, how dare you put me through such humiliation? A punch. It was a casual, relaxed punch, without any power or aura attached to it. However, the power contained within that punch was the most harrowing one in the entire world. The dimensions collapsed. The world collapsed. The universe collapsed. All it took was the blink of an eye. Lin Fan looked at everything before him. It was pure darkness, without any light nor sound. Oh, has my strength gotten this strong already? Have I destroyed everything with a single punch and arrived at the era of nothingness once more? Lin Fan stood there without moving at all, as though he was trying to sense out for something. There was no concept of time here, so he did not know how long it had been. 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years, 100,000 years, 1,000,000 years. By the time Lin Fan stretched out his hand, that patch of nothingness no longer existed, and a majestic sun appeared in the void. Then appeared a spot. A bright moon appeared. A one-dimensional universe was formed. A two-dimensional universe was formed. A three-dimensional universe was formed. Heavenly Lord Shinfeng seems to love writing novels. Since that's the case, let him continue writing novels forever then. Lin Fan pointed out with his finger. In that three-dimensional universe, an azure blue planet appeared. He then infused a stream of aura into it. As time passed, humans were gradually formed. After a long time, a really long time. The time arrived at the 21st century as a young man came into Lin Fan's peripheral vision. Sitting quietly in front of his computer, he was typing out his novel silently. Lin Fan smiled as he continued creating the universes until it reached the 10th dimension. At that instant, an infinitely huge planet appeared. Lin Fan closed his eyes gently, as though he was reminiscing about something. By the time he reopened his eyes once more, living beings appeared one after another. On that particular planet, among many sects out there was a single sect named Saint Devil Sect that existed. Within it was a young little servant disciple whose name was Lin Fan. In another sect was a female disciple with a peerlessly beautiful face, her name was Zhan Yongxian. Somewhere in a forbidden ground, a woman reigned over the world with a renowned reputation. She was called the Fire-Water Empress. After a really long time, Lin Fan no longer knew how many of those micro-universes he had created. He was starting to feel bored now as he finally fell asleep in an endless space of nothingness. Time slipped by just like light did. The first time he woke up, he disseminated a trace of his consciousness, which carried with it a small part of the system's powers. The second time he woke up, he disseminated yet another trace of his consciousness, which carried yet another small part of the system's powers. After a really long time, he discovered that there would always be a legend within all the worlds that he had created. And the name of that legend was Lin Fan. After everything was done, Lin Fan's gaze peered through the endless multiverses out there. Yunxian, Fire Water Empress. Let me accompany you guys properly till the end of the universes as we slip off to disappear in the long rivers of time. The end. The novel will be updated first on this website. Come back and continue reading tomorrow, everyone.